Hello. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the vsquare with Vivek and Vidhika. I'm Vivek.
And
And
I'm Vidhika.
hi. That's great. Good coordination. So this is our show where we talk about things pretty much. That's literally what we
Very
do.
generally things. There's
Just
no
things.
specificity here.
There's absolutely none. In fact, if you find us using specifics, please come find us later and
Yes.
threaten us with a good time. No, I was going to say, so thank you so much for joining us. So I'm Vivek, and like I said, my handle on Twitter is at VivekT17. That's VIVEKT17.
And I'm Vidhika, and my handle is at VIDHSTER, which is a nickname I got in college, and it stuck, and I never changed my handle. So there we have it.
All right, that's great. Actually, I'd love to hear that story sometime. But maybe we can just say like what we're doing here. So here's what happened. I kind of like posted on Twitter saying, "Hey, the best." I don't even remember what the tweet was, but I think it was like,
Should I pull it up and read it verbatim?
"Let's do it. Let's do it."
Actually, okay.
Actually, I have it. I have it.
Oh,
I
there
have
we
it.
go.
Now that I
Look
think
at you,
about it.
prepared.
So I said, being a talk show host has to be the greatest job in the world. People just show up and you get to ask them things, empathize, joke around, and get paid. The cat seems to be having a brilliant producer taking care of all the booking parts, but this seems like an absolute dream. So I was just like thinking out loud. I didn't really think about it too hard. But then you responded, and what did you say? You
I'll
said,
let you
I
read it in my
know,
voice since I don't have it in front of me.
hey, it's a lot of pressure. Vivek has to do a Vidhika impression. I did not come prepared.
Yeah, and it better
Um,
not be bad, or else I'll be offended.
Ouch. Okay, here's the best impression you've ever heard of yourself. I know, right? I've thought this for a while too. Want to co-host a talk show? Uh, you know, uh, very accurate, I know. And
That's
I was like,
exactly how I sound. You nailed it. Oh man.
and I was like,
Okay.
kind of. Let's do a limited episode. Let's do a run, and this is episode number 1. So that's what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember when I saw that tweet, it was speaking to me because I'd been on break and just, thinking about like what would it be to I wasn't thinking a lot about like what would it take to have a perfect day, but the idea of just like talking to people and getting paid for it and yeah, literally like hearing their stories, it just yeah.
Mhm.
I can't envision like a better way to spend time aside from maybe just like combining that with fun things and walking around and whatever else. So
Yeah.
here we are.
It's a pretty top tier experience. It's also so low effort, honestly. Like a lot of people, like it's an uphill battle to have a conversation, and I think for both of us, it's probably like the exact opposite. It's like
No, we're
downhill.
conversation whores. Like it's definitely.
You stole my line. No, that's
Is
great.
that your
I
line?
usually call myself not a conversation whore. I call myself
Oh,
an attention whore, and you've
oh.
clearly picked up on it, and you're like, okay.
So I don't call myself an attention whore, but I do call myself a conversation whore because I don't like
Mm,
attention in the sense of like I don't like to talk to big groups at once usually, except
right.
for I guess I speak sometimes, but in terms of like group conversations are a little bit, we've talked about this before, they're a little nerve-wracking for me, but one-on-one conversations, like, yeah, love them.
Easy, right? Yeah, exactly. For me, group conversations are great too. I love doing that, but
Well,
conversations in
attention whore.
general.
I mean, of course you do.
Hey, oh my God, this is like calling out
Oh, I'm not
Vivek
allowed to
Day.
say it. Oh shit.
No, 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 no. You're allowed.
Oops.
It's okay. It's okay. Co-hosts are allowed to stab each other in the heart
Okay. Well,
repeatedly. Yes.
I'm glad I'm
So
doing my job very well. So
yes. Okay. Got it. So that's how this started. That's what we're doing here. So we thought, we just like, have a talk show, like a Twitter talk show. We just talk about things that, come up for us, interesting conversations that bubble up on the on our timelines, or things that we participate in. Maybe have guests on, and just basically have a discourse lounge. just for the two of us.
But have
And
fun with it. Like we're
yeah,
just kind of this is an experiment. We're having fun messing
to
around and
quote Vidhika from yesterday, we're just fucking around.
I
Yes, that's what we're doing.
oh god, I would never use such words. Come on.
Yeah.
Ever.
Oh my god, absolutely. Vidhika never swears. So
Angel.
just yeah.
Can't
It's
you see?
okay, fine. I'll be the villain here. Okay. Okay, cool. So that's how this started. And I thought we'd start in with like, just like a check-in. How's it going? How's it going this week for you?
Yeah. How is it going? It's going pretty well. This actually comes at kind of a good time because I went to my first improv class yesterday after years, I think. So just the timing of everything is working out weirdly. Yeah, it was a fun class. I was the only person there, I think, under the age of 50. But hey, I honestly, it was kind of a blast. And I think that they were modeling the behavior of just like not caring, letting go, letting loose, doing whatever they wanted, saying whatever they wanted. The number of dirty jokes 50-year-olds make, I was not prepared for, but it has been fun. Yeah, so that has been going on. It's been a little hard getting back into like the groove because work started up again. I mean, work
Yeah.
started last week, but I'm still struggling to just after breaks, you get spoiled,
Yeah.
so that's been a little bit of an adjustment. Um, but it's been a good week so far.
Cool.
How about you?
Very interesting. Mine's been pretty good too. Yeah, also trying to get adjusted to life, I guess. After break, I spent my break skiing in Mammoth. It was like we got snowed in basically completely. Shout out to Sodi at Monotremism, who I went to Mammoth with, and he, we kind of got snowed in. It was like a winter wonderland. We were like, which is nuts for California. We got so
Yeah.
much snow. In fact, Mammoth has enough snow to like they got more snow by the New Year's, actually by this weekend, than they got all of last season through like
Wow.
April, So California is getting a lot of much needed precipitation. So yeah, so I don't usually get SAD, like seasonal affective
Mm,
disorder or whatever, but it's like super dark and it's giving a totally different vibe to LA. And maybe I'm feeling a little bit of that, just like getting back into
yeah.
work and everything. But I wanted to talk about two things that you said. One, awesome job, by the way. Like improv is my thing. You
Oh yeah.
saved your news for going to your first improv class in years for the time we started recording. Host behavior, very professional. So
It
congratulations.
wasn't even intentional. We just got sidetracked earlier, so Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So wait, what's making you either get into it or get back into it, or is it a New Year's kind of thing? What's drawing you into
No,
this
it's
endeavor?
not a New Year's thing. I had actually signed up for an acting class. Like I've never really done acting, but I thought it'd be fun to try like an intro to acting class I was gonna say semester, I guess last season. So there's a
Mm,
theater close to where I live and they do classes like every season they have a new host of classes. So I'd signed up for it and I was
mm,
really looking forward to it. I wanted just something to immerse myself in. And then it got canceled at the very last minute.
ooh,
And so I couldn't obviously go and it was too late in the game for me to sign up for something else. And so they asked if I wanted a refund and I was like, you know what, just keep the money for now. I'll take a class in the future and, give me a credit. And so then I had this class that I'd already paid for and I looked at the offerings and then I
mm,
realized I just wanted to do improv again. I've done it like years ago. It's weird. Improv is something I don't feel like I'm particularly good at, even
mm,
though in real life I feel like I'm able to improvise decently, which is weird. Because I can think on my feet usually, but in
mm,
improv class, it's hit or miss for me.
mm,
But I just wanted to get back into it. I find improv to be, I know earlier I mentioned I don't meditate. It's something I want to get into hopefully at some point.
mm.
I don't meditate at the moment.
What kind of brown person are you? Like
I
I'm.
know, I know. It's so funny actually these days to see like on Twitter all of these like words that I've grown up like hearing in songs or their aunties' names and stuff, and people just like use them because they're meditation terms, and it's so
Mhm.
funny. Yeah, I know. A bad brown person. I also don't like spicy food very much. So it's like a complete yeah outcast. I know. Um, but anyway, yeah. So what was I telling you? I was telling you about um Twitter? No, I was telling you about meditation. Yes, improv. So I find improv to be kind of like it's like its own meditative practice, I'm convinced. Because when you're improvising, you literally have no choice but to be present unless you want to suddenly be in your head and then be stuck on stage, you know? I find it to be one of the activities that helps me just stay so grounded, stay so present in the moment. Otherwise, I'm the type of person that will stress about the future, think too much about the past. So I don't know. I just find it, I think improv so much fun. And it's really,
Hmm.
it's a good opportunity to let everyone see everyone's silly side,
Mm-hmm.
find kind of the hilarity in everyday moments. And yeah. And I love that you don't have to plan. Like you don't have to memorize anything. I'm not good at that. You don't have to like do any
You're
homework.
not good at memorizing things. Also, grade brown person. Oh my God.
Oh, I mean, okay,
Come
so, like, I
on.
did well in school. I can memorize if I have to, but it's not something I enjoy. It
Okay.
feels like work, and improv,
Okay.
you just show up. It's like, oh, it's like I do everything last minute, and improv makes that's literally the game plan for improv, so,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But anyway, so it's something that I used to do years ago, haven't done it since the pandemic, basically, realized I really missed it, and so, yeah, decided to get
Okay.
back
Cool,
into it.
cool, cool, cool. Um, all right. Yeah, no, I had so much like with improv, I was just gonna say, like, by the way, so you did improv, it ended up being improv, but you were gonna take an acting class. Why did you want to take an acting class?
Just for something different. I feel like I'd done improv before, and I wanted to do something that was like performancy. I wanted to do something that was further out of my comfort zone, but that
Mm,
was like new.
mhm.
And I feel like a class is a really good way to just like immerse yourself because then I don't have to hold myself accountable. I have a thing to go to every week, and yeah, it's just something I wanted to try. No, like big aspirations, but just seemed fun,
Yeah,
seemed
gotcha.
growing.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you're going into your performative era, I
Was gonna
performance,
say, I'm trying no, that is the antithesis.
performance era. No, no, for sure. No, I mean, I could talk about improv forever.
I was gonna say, you're like the improv master, so, I'm still a baby improviser comparatively, but it's fun.
No, just it's more like I just like improv as a spiritual and emotional tool for life. Like,
Mm,
I mean, there's all this pickup artist discourse that was happening like last month on Twitter, which is I find very grating, and not because I don't have sympathy for people who are into that. It's just that just like I think everybody should just do improv. Like
mm.
you could replace all of pickup artistry with like improv, and
Hmm,
you would lose almost nothing and gain almost everything. So like
that's a take.
it's
Hmm, yeah.
yes, that's what I do. I sling hot takes about improv. Um, no, but I think it's very good for social skills. It's also very spiritual. Like you said, there was some connection between meditation and improv.
Mhm,
That is basically why I did it. It's
mm.
I had this salon on interintellect. Shout out to Anna. This is something I wanted to cover before we brought on our super surprise special guest for our first episode. But it's basically, so I did this salon on interintellect called Improvisation, Spontaneity, and Oneness. Um,
Mm,
it's basically how when you're genuinely improvising, you're not the line between what you're doing deliberately and what is being done through you kind of blurs.
mm,
You just you act in concert. There's this idea in improv called group mind, where there's just
mhm.
spontaneous coordination.
Which
Um,
is so cool. It's so fun to watch.
it's amazing. It's one of the headiest. Actually, heady is a word I mean like in a drunk sense. Like it's one of the most
Mm.
trippy and drunk experiences, but not actually heady. But since we mentioned it, I wanted to cover our origin story really quick. So I mentioned the intellect. Shout out to Anna at
Woo.
the Anna
We swear we're not being
dot.
paid to say this. This is just
We're not
yeah,
being paid.
we're just
Uh,
fans.
yeah, we're just fans because she created this amazing platform called the Interintellect, and I think I probably met you on the your salon, right? So
Mhm.
there's these salons, i.e., these group discussions that happen that are very well guided and contained, and I think I met you on your salon, which is called. Uh,
It was one of the friendship ones. The first one I did, I think it was called, like, I Get By with a Little Help
Little
from My
help from my
Friends.
friends. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Do you
Yeah,
remember what the cover photo was? Because I was very proud of it.
it was one of the TV shows or movies that
Yeah, TV show.
which no, I don't remember.
No? Okay. Troy and Abed in the morning?
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm just pretending because I've actually never seen Community, but I know who those folks
Wait,
are.
actually?
Yeah, that's
I feel
true.
like you would love it. Okay,
Yeah.
anyway, that's a side note,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so that's where we met, and then I think you DM'd me afterwards saying like in the spirit of the salon, I'd love to go first, and
mhm.
we've been chatting ever since. And it was a great salon about adult friendships and how to maintain them.
Thank you, thank you. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding. I didn't do any of the work. I just hosted, but yeah, it was a really, really good group, and it was such a fun it was just a really, like, I felt like it was such a friendly vibe. Everyone was just so nice to each other, and I think that's all salons, honestly, but it was a good time. I really enjoyed it.
yeah. Okay, awesome. Cool. I think that about covers our origin story. So I think we're
Yeah.
ready to, bring on our guest for the day. Also, our patron saint in some sense, and we'll explain why soon.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you ready, Vidhika?
Yeah, if our very,
Cool.
important guest is ready, I'm
Yes.
ready.
Okay, everyone, please welcome Visa. Woo.
Hello, hey guys.
Hi,
Hey,
Visa.
Vivek,
Visa. Oh,
Vidhika.
wow.
It's a podcast of V's.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
the V square just became the V cube, but yeah.
It's called the V square Visa.
Oh, that's
So
cute.
yeah. So this is V cube. So yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
You have great audio, by the way, Visa.
Oh, thanks.
It's very
It's
nice.
I just bought this headphone from like it's a store near my place. Sorry, I just woke up. I almost forgot that we have a. I mean, I didn't forget, but I didn't. My calendar
I didn't
is
forget, but I didn't remember.
yeah, exactly that. That's exactly correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah,
No,
I
that's
get
kind of my job. I should have sent you a note before
that's
you
all
got
right.
before went to
Yeah, this
sleep
was
at night.
Vivek's job, not mine, so it's all on him. I'm just gonna throw my co-host under the under the bus, apparently.
All right.
It's a very
Um,
improv move, Vidika.
yeah,
No, I was
no.
gonna say, yeah, I messaged Visa before and asked him, which he graciously accepted, and he was like, I don't usually wake up that early, and it was like Singapore time. I think it was 8 a.m. And I was like, why did I not think of that? But yeah, okay, welcome, Visa. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello.
We kind of wanted to bring you on because kind of the podcast was like about joking about the outcomes we wanted. I just
Nice.
posted on Twitter about like, hey, I think being a talk show host is the best job in the world.
Mhm.
And Vidika was like, yeah, you want to co-host a show with me? And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's keep joking. And then 4 tweets or 5 tweets in, we were like, are we doing this? And she tagged you too.
Yeah,
So
I literally, like, I was joking, and then I was like, "Yeah, I don't know why I said that," and then I was like, "Oh my god, Visa has infiltrated my brain. That's why I must have done it." So, yeah,
Wonderful.
it worked.
yeah.
All
So
the
thanks so much
repetitions,
for
it works, yeah.
I love to see it. Yeah.
yeah. So I was going to ask you, Visa, first. How did you come up with this whole joking about the outcomes you want? Was it straight from The Secret, or was it some
No,
yeah.
I still haven't actually read The Secret, but you kind of where did I hear about it? I mean, I didn't hear about it.
Mm,
That's interesting. That's a good question. I think I just had a lot of examples in my mind of
mm,
so I could if you follow me on Twitter, I have a lot of threads where if something kind of catches my attention and I'm like, that's interesting, I then keep an eye out for the next time I see something interesting in the same way, and then I thread it so that I have a link, have a thread of it, and I just noticed over and over again that people would sometimes would say, "Oh, I applied for this job as a joke and I got it," or
Mm,
I said to my girlfriend maybe we should break up as a joke and we did, and I'm like, that's a recurring thing that seems to happen, right? Like people don't seem to realize that they say things um half-heartedly or half seriously, but it
mm,
seems to be an expression of intent, and it seems to be something that even if it's not meant to be taken seriously in the moment, it now has entered the realm of possible outcomes that people are thinking of. And also, I guess older ideas about like framing and not necessarily positive thinking, right? So if you see the thread that I have, like the first thing I say is like a lot of people are fumbling their bags by joking about outcomes they don't want. So it's like, if that's happening, why don't you joke about outcomes you do want? So it's kind of a mirror thing, and I like the joking aspect of it. I think that I don't enjoy how much like the manifestation perspective is very, I mean, it's just aesthetics, right? It's not right or wrong, it's just what you feel comfortable with. And I just like the slightly silly, slightly, we don't really know if it's going to work or not, right? Because the whole, oh, I am going to be a success, I'm going to be a millionaire, like maybe that helps. I think that does help some people, but like I don't, I like the kind of jokey approach to it.
It almost feels like the jokey part is the focus in some ways, because it's the very like, it's lighthearted, it's playful, it's almost what enables you to say things that you normally wouldn't, like it's almost
Yes.
like you're giving yourself permission to like this, right? Like this is just, I don't think I would have said like, I am going to do a video podcast thing this year. Like that wasn't on my list of goals or anything.
Yeah.
But it's like when you joke about it, you're giving yourself permission to like allow it to be a crazy idea, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
And like as you were talking, I just realized, I didn't know that I was doing this, but I just realized that there were a couple of talks I did last year, and the ones that were the most popular, weirdly enough, were ones that I truly did. One of them I genuinely submitted as a joke, and it got picked up very seriously. And I hope the conference organizers don't know this, but even if they do, I would be happy to tell them now. They picked it up seriously. I didn't have any content in my head for it. I did something about love languages. I was like, oh, it'd be so funny if, I just came up with a title and I submitted it, and then they accepted it. And I remember being like, oh shit, they accepted it. This was a joke, So
Wait,
yeah.
really? You didn't expect them to accept it at all?
No, like, I
Wow.
mean, I don't think so, because I think I would have thought it through more if I had expected them to accept it. Like there are some proposals I do where I very much want them to accept it, and I think it through, and a lot of those don't get accepted. And so like now I've almost been like, should I just submit a bunch of jokes? Like that seems to do better. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I allow myself creativity.
Yeah. So there's a great David Ogilvy quote that I just remembered that I've referenced a bunch, where he says, the best ideas come as jokes. So make your thinking as funny as possible. Right? Because when there is humor, when you laugh, you're like, oh, there's a shortcut happening somewhere of interestingness. And that's why you laugh. And so you're likelier to find good ideas looking for jokes, or just than you are trying to look for good ideas. Because when you're trying to look for good ideas, people tend to introduce a filter where, oh, it has to be proper, it has to be reach some standard of, right? And then it gets solemn. And so similarly, I remember in like instruction, I wrote a thing a long time ago about like instructions for songwriters, and I can't remember who I got this idea from, but it's something like, if you try to write a good song, you'll be trapped in what you think good songs are. And if you're not a good songwriter yet, and you don't yet know what your idea of a good song is, that itself is a work in progress. So then you end up writing these very derivative, kind of like B plus, C plus songs that's just kind of predictable and boring. But if you try to write a bad song on purpose, very often again, when you try to write a bad song on purpose, you almost deliberately make weird choices. And very often there is an interesting choice next to the bad choice. Like it's bad in some weird way, but then if you resolve the thing that makes it off, then now you have an interesting song. And it's hard to actually do like 100 bad ideas and not accidentally do a good idea. Whereas you can attempt 100 good ideas, but because all of them are constrained by your expectations of what good should be, all of them are not that good. So there's something about that randomness, weirdness, jokiness that really introduces something interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think there's really something to that best ideas come with jokes meme. So if you hang out with a lot of comics and stand-up comics or improv guys, there's very often they develop this sense for there is a bit in there somewhere. I haven't worked it out yet, but there's a bit in there somewhere. And laughter has to do with the release of tension. Like that's just what it is. So what they're sensing is, there's something doesn't quite make sense. Something doesn't quite, there's some human frailty or farce that is there. I just need to flesh it out, but there's something there. But what they're developing a sense for, the spidey sense for, is this tension underlying that seems absurd. So I think that's probably true with ideas as well. There's something in there that I haven't quite fleshed out. And so it makes a lot of sense that the best ideas would come as jokes. It also makes a lot of sense that, Vidhika, you literally said, I would have thought about it more if it wasn't a
Right.
joke. I wonder if not thinking about it more was the secret ingredient that let it
Could be.
get out.
Yeah, because it kind of it's the whole, it reminds me a little bit of like how constraints fuel creativity. Like there's something about the fact that after I submitted the thing and it got accepted and I was like, oh, I need to actually come up with a way to connect these two disparate topics that I thought would be funny because I thought of a title. But now I have to connect it. And that actually forced me to be it forced me to be creative. It forced me to remix these two ideas that other people had not put together before, so I think some of it lies also in the sense of like when you're joking about something, there's usually an element of creativity, something different. Like a lot of times humor, right, comes from a familiar pattern and then breaking it. And most serious, no, I wouldn't even say serious, most like more formal things or things that you have thought through, yeah, you do tend to follow the pattern and you don't break it. And to some extent I also feel like when people, joke about the outcomes you want, when some of that stuff happens, I also wonder if some of it's because people are drawn to things that are funny, that are different, that are, like that's almost our nature. Like if something is so wild and you haven't heard it before, you might be drawn to it more so than the plethora of things that exist already that are derivative, to your point earlier, Visa.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's when you say drawn, right? The attention just goes easy. It's just a lighter object for your attention to go to. Where if it's something heavy, like a good idea is such a heavy thing. Oh, it's a lot of expectation. It's just harder to look that way. Where it's much easier to look at a joke. The other thing, Visa, like when you say, actually, one of my favorite ways to interpret your focus on, joke about the outcomes you want is, so one way to read it is, which word you put the emphasis on in that sentence, right? I think I had a tweet sometime that says like, so focus on the outcomes that you do want rather than the ones that you don't want. That's one way to read it. The other way is like joke about the outcomes you want instead of ruminating on the outcomes you want, right? It's like just riff on it or have fun with it. That seems to take us in a different direction as well.
Yeah,
I think a lot of sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think of joking as like a subset of the broader focus on what you want perspective, and I mean that's basically it. Vidhika, you're saying?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I think some of it is just we allow ourselves, we don't take ourselves as seriously, so we allow ourselves possibilities. Vivek, you and I were talking recently about allowing the possibilities of good things, and I think sometimes that universe isn't even open to us because we haven't gone there. But I mean, I know we were also talking about this concept of like joking about the outcomes you want. Sometimes, like I was telling Vivek earlier, Visa, that like I know when I was younger, and honestly even to this day, there's this sense I have sometimes where I don't even know if it's that I joke about it, but I'll say things like, oh man, I'm probably gonna fail that test, or that's what I said when I was younger, or oh man, I'm probably gonna mess up this talk, or things like that. And I think it's almost like a protective defense mechanism.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. But it's such a like ingrained habit that it's taken me, it's not gone yet. Like it's something I'm now more aware of, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing again where I'm saying a thing that I don't actually want to happen, but I'm saying it because probably I'm trying to guard myself against disappointment later on, So.
Yeah.
And Vivek, I loved your take on that. Vivek had this really fresh way of thinking about how to get over that fear.
Like allowing?
Yeah, well, allowing, and then like what you talked about from the standpoint of like relief and steeling yourself, like all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even remember. Yeah, relief. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. There's a thought that's right up on the top of my head that I want to ask Visa about. Visa, you were saying earlier about. So I wanted to ask if there's been a time in your life or examples in your own life as you started noticing people joking about the outcomes in their, that they wanted and getting those outcomes in some sense or stumbling upon them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes they don't even have it in their heads, and then 10 years
Yeah.
later they look at a tweet and they're like, oh, you
Yes.
know what, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Has that happened to you? That was one question, and then I had another question about uh, word magic, and I wanted to talk about your idea of that. But first, is there a time that comes to mind for you where you kind of stumbled into, hey, wait, I was joking about this like a while ago?
Hmm. There must definitely be several. I tend to remember the ones that I was very intentional about. So, things like I want to become a writer. I want to make a living as a writer. I want to, I remember a specific phrase I remember telling my friends as like when we were like teenagers. I had this idea of being a roving troubleshooter. That's what I called it. And this is before, so I guess CEOs might call it like managing by walking around if you are the CEO, right? And I didn't even know anything about management, anything about, I just, I just like the idea of, I'm smart. I like thinking about problems. Wouldn't it be nice if I made a living, if people paid me to just walk around and solve problems, right? Such an idealistic, naive perspective. But the idea of it just came to me as wouldn't it be nice? And I said it to a few people, and most of them were like, "You're crazy. There's no such job," right? And like I kind of sort of do some version of that now as like a marketing consultant. So it is within a narrower frame, but what effectively people, like call me up and pay me money to hang out with them and talk about their problems, which is very close. And like it was surprising to me to go back and read my old like journal entries and stuff, and even I think like Facebook on this day like 10 years ago or whatever, like a argument in one of my statuses. It's like, oh, that the seeds for that were really sown so much earlier. I remember several things like that. When I was looking back, so I published my first ebook in 2020, but I found blog posts from like 2016 where I'm like, oh, I know that I want to get more serious as a writer. At some point, I should try and sell something, not even necessarily to make money, but just to get into the headspace of I want to be a professional in some dimension. So I want to have something for the public offering in some dimension that involves money in some way. And it's just very striking how far back things go. Like and that's actually going to be the topic of one of my subsequent essays, which is like things can take so long, and I think very often people operate in these very like narrow cycles, right? Like oh, New Year's resolution, like this year is the year that I got to do this thing. It's fine. That's not a bad. It's nice to have, oh, this week I'm going to do this month I'm going to do this what and so on. Like there's many ways we carve up our time, but I think I don't see enough discussion of uh, oh, I had ideas and plans that took 15 years to manifest, right? I know like SpongeBob SquarePants, the cartoon, right? Like if you trace back the story of that, it's like the creator's entire life was leading up to it. Like he was an oceanographer like he worked as a fry cook as a teenager. He studied oceanography and he was like a teacher at one of those like ocean institutes where the kids would attend, and he would draw comics for them. And like you really see how every single aspect of his life added up to become, oh, this guy was to make SpongeBob SquarePants.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm just kind of I'm not directly answering your question.
No,
Uh
no, no. I think
Stuff that I
That's so
joke
cool. I didn't
about.
know that about SpongeBob. That's
It's
fascinating.
very cool. I think that also deserves an essay. Like it's really like I started with the question of how come this IP, this intellectual property, like how come it's so dense and rich in memes? Like it's like the only things that come close,
right.
like maybe Star Wars, like like
Hmm.
how are there so many SpongeBob memes? And so I went to investigate like how did it get started, and I'm like, oh, like the guy, the comic artist is an actual oceanographer and he's an actual educator. Like there's so much depth to it. Like the final output seems, oh, it's a cartoon, but there's just it makes so much sense when you dig into it. It's like, oh, like this goes way back. And yeah, I have in the book Blink, there's a story of a firefighter who goes into, like, a veteran firefighter who brings his team into a house fire, and something just feels off to him, and then he's like, "We gotta get out now," and like, we gotta get out now. He drags everyone out, and like 10 seconds later, the whole house collapses, and it turns out that the fire was in the basement. So and he didn't know why he knew it, but it's like the temperature was too high for what the fire was around them. The smoke was something, like, everything was a little bit different, and he just felt something was off. And so, so there's this idea of like a basement fire, like the metaphor of a basement fire has been sticking with me. Like, it if you don't know that there's a fire in the basement, but and this, and like, so that's a, like, sort of bad example. It's unhealtty, or like in the case of a house on fire, like, you don't want a basement fire, right? Like, this
Yeah.
that makes things worse. But I was thinking about it in relation to like passion, and in relation to like the love that someone has for their work. Like, so I kind of want to have like basement fire passion, if that makes sense. Like, it's not obvious when you look at it on the surface. So I would describe the SpongeBob as a basement fire output, a piece of, like, the depth of knowledge and understanding, and all of that. Like, even the child psychology, right? That goes into, like, from years and years of just teaching kids. So like, you don't necessarily see it on the surface, but there's all this stuff going on underneath. And yeah, I think, so to try and tie that back to like joking about outcomes and stuff, I do think that when we joke, like, we tend to draw from these like deeper subconscious processes that might not be like, superficial passing working memory, but it's more of like, oh yeah, that reminds me of when I was a kid and this happened, or that reminds me of something. And those, like, I keep getting this mental image of lightning. Have you ever seen like lightning in slow motion? You can see the charge spread out from the cloud, and it goes in like many different directions. And it's very, like, so before you see the action, so when you watch lightning in real life, you see the strike. But if you watch the footage of it, even before the strike, there's actually these very thin, very light, like, fractal, many direction branching patterns of very small static. And then it branches out until it finds like the shortest path to the strike point, and then it actually goes back up before it strikes. And there's something about that I think, in all connection, right? Like, in seeking for connection, you go out in these branching paths of possibilities, and then when you find the outcome that fits, it then connects back, and then it's like whoosh, it's like powerful. And so same for, when you read like success stories of anyone, right? When you tell your own success story of whatever it is that you succeeded at, there's no time and space to cover all of the other branching paths that did not work out, right? And you're not even trying to be dishonest or whatever. You're telling the story of how it happened. Like, for example, I tend to forget that before I started working in marketing, which was kind of random-ish, I wanted to be a flight steward. I wanted to like pay the bills by flying and serving, and then write in like cafes around the world. I was very invested in that narrative, and I think it would have been cool, but like I didn't get
that
through.
sounds like a cute sort of story.
Yeah, when I was like like that was my dream, and then I didn't get through the first round, and I desperately needed a job because I had to pay for my mortgage, and I happened to get an email from someone who was interested in who wanted to hire me to work in marketing, and so now when I tell the story of, well, my career was in marketing, and then it's also true that as a teenager I used to play in bands. That's true, and I used to like market our shows, right? So the narrative, the lightning strike going backwards was like, oh, I'm a writer now. I used to work in marketing. I used to do marketing for a band. All of that is true, but it looks like a straight line, and that's not true. There were branching paths along the way that, if I had gone into being a flight steward, maybe I'd have been like a travel writer or something, and then maybe like then that path would look like a straight line, but it's a completely different branching path, right? And there's just something about that smash.
Uh-oh, did we lose Visa?
Oop, maybe we lost Visa.
Oh,
I'm
he's
still
back.
here.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Visa's back. Okay.
You froze for just a second. There's so much in there that you just said that I like is resonating. Like one of the things when you talk about the lightning and the different paths that could have been but were not, it reminds me of how like several years ago someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and said something about like, oh my god, like your trajectory is just like it's so amazing and so perfect. Like I'd love to chat, and how did you make these decisions? And I like laughed. I had to talk to this girl on the phone, and I like laughed because I was like, in retrospect, it looks like the dots connect really perfectly, but in the moment, I was just making the next best decision. A lot of times they were bad decisions, honestly, but like they look good on paper, and it's not actually that perfect. But I think some of those things, you know, like to your point, Visa, about like, oh, you were marketing for your band, right? Like there were certain things that you were doing without necessarily thinking I'm going to go into marketing. But some of those seeds I think are planted when we're
Yeah.
just along our way. We don't even remember that we planted them. It's like we
Correct.
planted them, we walk around, we come back and we're like, oh, hey, this thing has grown. I guess
Yeah.
I should maybe continue to water it, you know?
Right.
And I almost feel like that's what that happens a lot with like one thing I've been trying to go back towards is just like, what are the things I enjoyed when I was a kid? I've realized like now I lead a team of like, you know, content designers, which basically means like they're writers who understand design.
Right.
When I look back, I'm like, when I was like 7 or 8, I used to write poetry. I used to do model judiciary in high school. Like I did all these things that had to do with like constructing arguments and words. And then I just sort of went down a different path for a while. And now I've kind of come back and I'm a lot happier, but I needed that detour maybe to realize that. So yeah, I mean, I think that resonates. And then a quote came to mind as well when you were talking about how people focus on, we don't hear about this took me 26 years to get here. We're always hearing about growth and quick growth and stuff like that. But there's like I don't follow soccer, but there's a Messi quote where he says something like, you know, it took me 17 years to become an overnight success. And I think that's like true for many people. They just don't admit it, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, yesterday I got an email notification that somebody bought. I mean, every time somebody buys one of my ebooks, I get like an email, like a phone notification, and I recognize an email from someone who bought one of my books yesterday. That is someone that I was speaking to when I first started my first job, and that was like 2013. And I'm like,
Wow.
you know, it's really like the thing is, it's very difficult to convey that. I do want to write an essay about this as well, but like you know, when you read people asking things like, oh, how do I build an audience, and how do I, you know, and there's always this, oh, grow your following by 1,000 people in 3 months or something like that, and that can be done, but it's really these long trajectories that really, I think, kind of, I don't know if it's like tautological to say it, but they go the distance, and they really add like this heft and this you know, people who've seen you and known you through the years, like you have the relationships that you build with them is just more it's more, I find it more meaningful and more,
There's more depth.
yeah, and you really can't overnight that. Like it's the persistence and just showing up repeatedly for a long period of time. It seems mundane until it starts to become magical.
Yeah.
And then when people ask about the magic, it's kind of, you want to give them a magical answer, but it's actually mundane. It's actually, oh, you just show up every day for a very long period of time and you talk to a lot of people, and it starts to accumulate. You know, like I really love the idea that running a marathon is just putting one foot in front of the other again and again. And the difficult part is managing your psychology such that you keep going, right? So I've never run a marathon. I've completed like a half marathon, and it was hell for me. So I don't think I'm going to do a marathon ever. But like then people ask, how do you write a book? It's the same thing. You put one word in front of the other, then you just keep going. And you know, and it's just most people in most domains, they will keep going until they just feel like they can't, and that's fine, right? But like if you want to keep going further, you then have to do like these meta studies of, oh, you know, like, so again, like climbing a mountain is one step after the other, but for more complex projects, you have to like, oh, you have to get the shoes, you have to get the grippy things, you have to get all these additional preparation and resources. But fundamentally, it's about, oh, I can't keep going if I do X, so I have to do X and Y, and then it kind of cumulatively gets more and more complex. And why did I bring that up? It's just it feels so simple. like complexity arises from such simplicity, and yet it feels I don't know, I'm feeling this out to try and find the right thing that I want to say.
Mhm.
There's something like, yeah, it's the magical is in the mundane, and like there's a simplicity in the complexity. And I just feel like nobody, very few people really convey this well. And even when you try to convey it, I don't know if people are not like receptive to properly hearing it, they won't really hear it. And like it's only when they go on to do their own thing and they're like, oh shit, like it really is,
Mm.
like it's so strangely simple. I mean, it's complex, but like the underlying thing is strangely simple. And yeah, I don't even know if I did a decent job of conveying that. Maybe it can never really be conveyed. Like you just, like I think each person needs their own experience to kind of connect the dots too. Because like Vidika, I went to see your Twitter timeline, and you have this comic in your cover photo, which is like the full range of human
Mm.
experience, and then each person selects like 3 or 4 different points from the full range of human experience
Mhm.
to convey to the other person. And if like we are selecting different points, we feel like we don't understand each other. And
Yeah.
if we have some points that seem to overlap, we're like, oh, this person and I get along, we understand each other better.
Yeah.
And like all communication is like that, right? Like we're always
Yep.
selecting like these words which are so limited in scope, and we hope that they can trigger an understanding in someone else. And the magic of it is it actually sometimes happens. We
Yeah.
sometimes manage to convey something to the other person.
It's
But yeah,
very exposure dependent. I think that's the beauty of exposure, right? Like the more exposure you have, the more data points, the more likely you are to converge with someone on some of those on that spectrum. And I think a lot of what you're describing is like almost like people are looking for a shortcut, right? They're looking for a formula. They're looking for something that will magically get them to this point. And I think a lot of this goes to, I wonder too if social media plays a role. I'm sure it does, where like they're comparing their step one to like,
Mm.
but you're already there. How are you already at the top of the mountain? And the person at the top of the mountain's like, because I climbed it, but like you're standing at the bottom, just like, but I want to be up there. I want to see the view you have. And
Right.
yeah, the answer is maybe, mundane and
Yeah.
repetitive.
Oh,
But I
it's
think,
funny. Yeah, my friend. So my friend Paul Millett, he published a book called The Pathless Path, and we were both kind of working on our books at roughly the same time. And like my book is very kind of chaotic, and it's a PDF, it's lots of links, it's sprawling, kind of a mess. And he published his book, and it's like this polished, pristine bestseller kind of like book. And I was like, oh damn, how did he manage to do that in like the same amount of time I was doing my thing? And I was kind of I was even like I think beating myself up about it a little bit. It's like, and then he posted something that was like, oh, like here's the making of my book, and it goes all the way back like 15 years he's been blogging. I'm like, oh, of course that makes sense. Like there's no way you could have written that book so well in a year. Like it's not possible. Like you have to have been like stewing on it and working on it for a long time, and then you have the overnight or like over year thing, right? So I've encountered this several times. Like, I like to think that I keep track of good writing in the world broadly as much as I can as a person with interest in writing. And like there are a couple of occasions where I encounter something, I'm like, that's unreasonably good. It's so unreasonably good that if that person turns out to be my age, I'm going to be depressed because I did not think it's possible for a human to write this well with like 20 years of experience. And then I search the name on on like Google. I'm like, please, and they're like 78 years. I'm like, yes. Like they are also human. Like it takes decades. Like one of those was it's a biography of Steven Spielberg by this lady who's like older than him. And like when I started reading the book, I'm like, this is an incredible bio. How do you write so well? And then I searched that she's been writing for decades and decades. I'm like, okay, there's no. And so there's a similar there's a joke anecdote. She's like a lady going to a violinist at Carnegie Hall or whatever, like, oh, I would give my life to play like you. And he's like, ma'am, I did. I
Yeah.
like that's what I did, And yeah, there really is something to that.
Yeah, there's so much there. It's almost like the quote that came to mind was the Steve Jobs's "You can't connect the dots forward" thing,
True.
where a lot of these, I mean, there is an element of showing up and repetition and persistence. There's also this element of like you don't know which lightning strikes or which path it's going to
You really
take
don't, yeah.
down. Like the reason Steve Jobs was talking about that was talking about his calligraphy class he took in college, right? He had no idea that would that would play into his life path, or how it would, right? I think I take your point, Visa, as like, yes, playing long games, right? Thinking of long games,
Mhm.
but also try to use the filter of a long game to see how you're already playing a long game, right?
Yeah.
There's already things that you've probably done when you were
Correct.
fucking around, when you were
Mhm.
procrastinating, when you were being a lazy fuck,
Yeah.
right? What are you being a lazy fuck about? There's all
Yeah.
kinds of weird things that we're playing around with, and that's a very different frame from, oh no, I have to have one thing and then do it
Mm.
for 40 years, which
Yeah.
may or may not come like you can't plant
Correct.
that, right? You
I
can't, like,
agree. Yeah.
it has to
I
sprout
have
from the basement fire.
Mhm. I have a thread somewhere that's like, I think of whatever it is you're doing when you're avoiding whatever it is you're quote unquote
Hmm?
supposed to be
I
doing.
remember that.
Like I think of it as being directed by impulses that are like a sign of like your deeper interests often. And then some people are like, oh, I'm just watching like trashy movies on Netflix. But like even then, like why do you choose the specific trashy movies that you choose? There's like there's always something there that like not everyone chooses the same trashy movie. Some people choose like I don't know B grade horror. Some people choose action movie. Like I realize whenever I'm sick, I
Absolutely.
love to watch action movies, and like that's interesting. Like there's something interesting there, right? Like what is it that you're drawn to
You're
specifically?
making it easy for me to justify being a couch potato. I'll just think about, why am I watching this?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
but
promise you that there's something in there that will surprise you. Like, and yeah, it might not be necessarily the main thing in your life that you want to like point at, but it will add a dimensionality and depth to it in ways that you can't anticipate, right? Like yeah, I really I very much treasure and value. I'm repeating myself. Like I carry all these like notes and thoughts from all these things. Like one random thing that I've been thinking about for years that is very difficult to explain to anybody else, but I bet it's going to pay off in some way. And even if it doesn't, I don't care because I'm interested in it. It's so there's a video game series that I really liked called the Mass Effect trilogy, and then they had a sequel called Mass Effect Andromeda, and that sequel is bad. Like, and I have been obsessed for a long time. Why was that sequel bad? And like when like they just the first three were so good, and they like had a good thing going, and they could have continued, but they didn't. And a part of it is and I want to understand it. It's like why is this is there's like layers to understanding it, right? Like is a story poorly written? um and part of it is yes, part of it is like, it turns out there's like management issues and like production issues, and like oh yeah, because any serious player or gamer or writer can tell you what a decent I mean okay, same for like Game of Thrones season 8, right? Like why was it so bad? Like most people, if they sat down to think about, I mean most authors or creatives, if you told them sit down for like 2 hours and think about everything that went bad and try and fix it like on in paper, like they could do it. Like I'm pretty sure. But so to understand why that happened, you got to get into like, well, there must have been conflicts in the writer rooms, right? There must have been this, there must have been that. So what starts out as a Game of Thrones sucks. Why? I mean, not even why. Just most people just it sucks. I'm angry, or I don't care, or like there's that first level thing. But then you start investigating, and anything I think when you start investigating it starts to get infinitely interesting because it connects with everything else, right? Like, and yeah, so even with my writing, I feel like I was paralyzed for a while because I kept trying to write good essays. And like when you again, it's the same thing with the songwriting. It's like when you're trying to do the good thing, you're trying to plan your 40-year life trajectory. Oh, I need to do the important things. Like it's barren. It's like you can't you have to screw around. You have to be like, like, and it's very often the thing is like, I can't write this essay. I'm just gonna go and watch this trashy movie, or I'm gonna go and go for a walk with my spouse. Just some nonsense. And there's always something interesting in that nonsense. You start pulling the thread. I have a phrase in my book, which is like, you're bored and you investigate why you're bored and you start pulling that thread and you get to like your identity and your fears. Like, why am I afraid of why am I not doing exciting things that would be interesting? Say, oh, because I'm scared and I don't want to admit to myself that I'm scared. Why do I not want to admit to myself? Why do I not want to admit to myself that I'm scared? Oh, because of some childhood shit. And then like you keep pulling, it started with I'm bored, and eventually you unravel the fabric of your entire identity and like the whole universe. And then when you piece it back together, you are no longer bored, but you're no longer you as well. Like you're a new you, right? You've been
Absolutely.
reborn in a sense.
You're like a remixed version, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so
Yeah.
interesting.
It reminds me of this. There's an Augustin Burrs quote where he says, like, I'm not quoting it exactly, but something along the lines of like, I'm just a bunch of flaws stitched together with good intentions. And when you were saying that, Visa, I'm kind of thinking about the unraveling, and like it is very much like a, yeah, there's so much there, and it's like that in research. There's that concept of like laddering, or you keep asking why, and it's like as you do that, you're getting closer and closer to a person's like values, to their deep, whether they're dark or not, deep dark fears, and things like that. Yeah, it's it's super interesting, and also like explains a lot about why even the mundane choices that we make are not actually as, like, not everyone is making the same mundane choices, right? Even if we're like, oh, what were you doing? Oh, I don't know, I was just wasting time. I don't know. Everyone has a slightly different version of what they did in that wasted time.
Yeah, it's autonomy, right? It's it's so sad
It's
that
agency.
yes,
Yeah.
right. And it's so sad that I feel that we don't appropriately honor that, like in our modern life. I mean, I bet if you trace it back, it's probably always been the case in some way that, like, you could almost say that there's a few different versions of this idea, right? One is that, oh, all children are artists, and the challenge for professional artists is to remain childlike into their adulthood, or like, just. I think in the Steven Spielberg biography, the author said something like, he's able to take these sort of fears and childhood anxieties and hopes and translate them onto the big screen, and it's just recurringly the same thing. It's like the thing that you don't take very seriously, the thing that we worship like geniuses for, is they just do the same thing but they take it seriously, right? And it takes some courage. Sometimes it's like bluster and arrogance or whatever. So Quentin Tarantino is like, he's not a nice person, I think, but his quotes on creativity always like ring with me. Like, he says things like, if you really love movies with all your heart and you really care, then like, and you try to make movies and you just persist, and again, this is also like the one foot in front of the other kind of thing. You just keep trying, and and it doesn't work, you try something different, you can't help but make a good movie eventually. And it's like, it doesn't matter what the camera is or the lens or the, like, it's just, you let your taste guide you and you keep trying. And then here's another quote, which is like, as a film nerd, right, and this could be applied to any field, right? Like, as a film nerd, you learn to have a sense of what your own taste is, and you know what you like and why you like it, and you know what you don't like and why you don't like it, and you can explain it in great detail, and it's not really up for, I mean, like, you can debate it with people, but it's not your positions, your taste itself is not up for debate, right? And then he said when he went into like the movie business, and like and stuff, and he would show them something, and he was like, they don't know what they think until they like talk to someone else and like corroborate their, like, how do we feel about this? Like, I don't know how I feel about this. How do we?
Opinion
And
by consensus.
yeah, and so he said, whenever I walk into the room, I'm always have the most points of view of that. And I think that generalizes to any kind of creative work, any kind of taste. And you don't necessarily need to be like, like mean to people about it or whatever. Like, it's your taste is your taste. Someone else's taste is their taste. It doesn't need to be conflict or misunderstanding. Doesn't have to be like ugly. But I just think about that a lot, because I feel like it's so obvious to me now. Like, it's so simple that you like what you like, and you can attend to it. And the word attention, right? Attend to. You can attend to the stuff that you like and honor and cherish that. And if you do that well, there's a resonance to it. It glows, right? Whether it's your writing, or whether you're doing stand up or you're doing playing music or whatever. If you really love your stuff and you really kind of attend to it, some people will recognize it, because it's just has this quality to it, this basement fire, whatever vibe. And when you do that, I mean, it's worth doing for its own sake, because it's a kind of reverence, right? It's a kind of way of having sacredness in your life and just having fun, having beauty, having a good time, right? And it's, to me, it's so obviously a good thing. But I mean, I guess I underestimate the degree to which now it's obvious, but I did kind of agonize about it for a long time. And yeah, I just want to convey that, to like share that idea with more people so that it can hopefully click for some people and be of use.
Yeah. Wow. There's just so much. I have notes, like I have so many notes that I want to I want to
Sure.
pull thread after thread after thread after thread after thread. Like, I mean, okay. So first of all, this basement fire thing. It's like we have this word, right? For us, we have the word fire under the belly, right?
Mm,
That's a phrase. That's a
mm,
phrase for a reason. Like, what is the basement of the human body? It's the root
mm,
chakra. It
mm,
is the pelvis. It is the lower
mm,
three chakras, which
mm.
are the basement of your body, right?
Right.
So having a fire in the basement that is, and I think the way the analogy really connects is, um, why is it a basement fire and not a first floor fire?
Mm,
Because you can't see it, right? But you can
mm.
sense it. It's
Yeah.
somewhere there. You can sense the
Right.
temperature, but it's not visual. It's not at your eye
It's
level. It's
subconscious
not
almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. It's either
Yeah.
subconscious, unconscious, or it's driving you in some way.
Yeah.
And by attending to your impulses and attending, honestly, I think focusing on the things that this came up earlier, but Visa, earlier you were saying you didn't really answer my question when you said, when I asked you about the a time that you joked about something, but you're like, but you literally said, I'm going to be a roving troubleshooter,
Right.
and even though it was almost the thing that came up for me, one of the threads that I wanted to pull was, you joke about the outcomes you want, and you can actually take your joke seriously.
Yes.
Take your jokes seriously. Like the way stand-up comics have this, or just comics in general have this. There's a bit somewhere. There's a bit in
Mhm.
there somewhere. There's a fire in that direction somewhere. Something's drawing me there. It's similar to this basement fire idea. I can't see it yet. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm drawn to it. And so let's say you are in that direction. You can take it seriously rather than just dismissing it as like um, a distraction, avoidance, all kinds of things, right? If your soul is being pulled in that direction, frame it in a way, you can at least frame it in a way that's, if it's not at least positive and like a huge, very dramatic, at least not dismissive, right? Because that's what I
Yeah.
do a lot. Dismiss it.
Well, I think some of it too is like one of the phrases that I say way too much is just like the idea that like intuition is data. Like I think sometimes we have this idea that like data is real and objective and it should be trusted and believed. But and in Blink, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this too. But there's a lot of what we consider intuition. It is data. It's like when I walk down the street, if I'm a little nervous, a lot of times it's because I heard a sound. There's some sort of input that I may not consciously recognize is creating that sense of fear or whatever, but it's important information still. It's almost like information at a subconscious level that's like it's not calibrated broadly. It's not something it wouldn't mean the same if everybody saw that thing or felt that thing, but to you it means something. And that's why it's so hard to communicate to other people, because you're like, well, it's a data point, but it's like an invisible data point. Like I can show you all day and you won't be able to see it. It's only for my eyes.
Yeah.
It's so funny that in the Celtic shamanic tradition, we have three cauldrons in your there's the underworld, but I don't know what the subtle body is called, but maybe it's just called the subtle body. But the basement cauldron, or the lowest cauldron, that's kind of, it kind of roughly maps onto the chakra system. But these kinds of things that we are drawn to, but we don't have words for, or perhaps they're intuitive. I think perhaps it's even more important to pay attention to them, because those are the things that sometimes our natural attention goes to, right? Rather than having to coerce anything. Like the whole quote about do what you love, because in order to get really good at something, you're going to have to do it a lot and suffer. You do it a lot, and you're more likely to do the things that you like than you don't like. But if your attention just goes easily in that direction, then that's another reason why we should probably pay attention to it. Another thing that came to mind was, Visa, you were talking about such beautiful phrase I think you used was, when something is attended to, there is a sacredness to it, like that, regardless of the other qualities of that piece of work or that piece of art, the fact that it was attended to deeply at all is attractive in some way
Yeah.
on its own.
Yeah.
This is a very beautiful idea, and it seemed to connect to another thing that I always found very fascinating about your. I haven't read your book, Fan, Friendly Ambitious Nerd. I've read Introspect, but
Mhm.
one of the things that really appealed to me about Friendly Ambitious Nerd was the definitions
Yeah.
of friendly and ambitious and nerd, right? And with nerd, I think your definition rests on the word curiosity, right?
Mhm.
And again, like that connects to this idea of attending to something, right? You're curious, you want to attend to it more.
Yeah.
It seems there's something really beautiful there.
I'm convinced, Vivek and Visa, that like my thing recently has just been like love is attention is this like phrase that just keeps going through my head. There was a movie I watched a while ago called Lady Bird, and in one scene, like she talks about like love. I don't remember the details, but she talks about like a certain city, and the other person is like, oh, do you love the city? Something like, no. So she says something about how like she pays attention to it, and she's like, well, love and attention, aren't they the same thing? And it reminded me very closely of what you were saying, Visa, because I think there is this certain thing, like you almost can't love something unless you are attending to it,
Yeah.
in some way. And this is a sort of silly example, but when you were saying like some things you just do for the sake of it, because that taste, expressing that taste or whatever makes you happy, but also like there's something really beautiful about watching someone, like somebody whose writing has, they're drawn to a certain type of thing and they go through with it. That's alluring to other people. Part of it's because I think it's probably authentic and like they're expressing themselves. But I had this thought where Vivek, you know this already, but I've been shopping for outfits for a wedding I have to go to in India recently. All right, I'm going to the wedding in February anyway, and I've been shopping a lot recently because I have to. And I went to the store, like a lehenga store, a couple days ago, and it was so interesting because part of the reason I was almost a little bit like frustrated while I was there, because I kept feeling like I had to justify my taste. So I know exactly, I'm picky, but I know exactly what I want. Like when I see it, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. No, I don't want something with a bunch of mirrors on it. Yes, I want that, And the auntie there was very nice, but a couple of times she would be like, but why don't you like yellow? Why don't you like it? Why don't you like this? And I just, it was so hard to explain. I was like, I can't explain to you why. She was like, but it'll look good on you. I was like, but that's not the point. Like, I don't like it. And if I don't like it, I'm not going to walk around confidently in that outfit because I don't think it's pretty. It doesn't matter how pretty you think it is. If I don't feel good in it, it does, like, I'm not going to look good in it because I won't wear it with a smile and with confidence and pep in my step. And so I think it's kind of similar where it's like with clothing, it's a totally different ballgame, but there's some similarities there where if you feel bought in, right? If you're sold on something, you're just going to wear it well. Whether it's words or an outfit, doesn't even matter.
Yeah. One of my hardest to, so it's the same principle, right? It's very hard to justify because it's basically unjustifiable. But like my personal belief is that as a creative, as a writer, for example, you have to do what you love. You really, again, that sounds so
like hokey and cheesy, but it's true. Yeah.
But like what I mean is, you have to enjoy your writing. Like it could be that there's some phrase, that some sentence, some paragraph that you want to write, you work at it, you struggle with it, it's not quite what you want, and then there's some like suffering in that process of getting to the paragraph that you enjoy, right? But like that enjoyment is non-negotiable to me in the frame of like trying to build a body of work and trying to express a creative spirit. To me, like that, so you might compromise to meet a publishing schedule, right? You might, and some level, like every, George Orwell said every book is a failure. Da Vinci said all art is never finished, only abandoned. And like those are kind of, I think those are phrases that we come up with as creatives to kind of it's sort of like to psychologically inoculate ourselves,
make ourselves feel better.
Something like that. Like those are necessary phrases for to let ourselves step away from the thing when we need to step away from it, because that we're finite beings and we have to ship things. But I do believe that both Orwell and Da Vinci, you can see the love in the work, right? It's like there's a point where they have to step away from it, and they can probably, if you ask them to, if you brought them back to life, I guess, and you gave them time and space to rework their work, they would probably start reworking it. Like I remember reading something about some guy who had published a book, and then like one of the first things he did was he took out like a red pen and started like just crossing out words and stuff in his published book, because it's never done. You're always improving, you're always learning, right? But and yet, what I wanted to say was, there is something about, so I periodically encounter um, people asking things like, what are the best principles of writing, or like how do you, like how do you do your paragraphs, or how do you do your whatever. And like I can tell you what I like, and I can tell you what, like, there's some consensus maybe, but like the most important thing is that you love it and you enjoy the feel of the words, you enjoy the taste of the words, even like just it's the enjoyment of the creative that is supersedes like every detail of whatever is being created. And that might mean like for 10 years everything you produce is shit and like nobody likes it. But it's part of a process that you're enjoying. I believe that if you're enjoying the work that you're doing, and you're reading good stuff, you're attending to your taste and the domain that you care about, it's better to produce years of work that nobody understands and everyone thinks is shit. And I would bet that eventually you would come out and people will say, holy shit, what a fresh perspective, what a refreshing, amazing voice to follow, whatever, new, nothing like it before. Rather do that than be like you're trying to mimic the consensus. And I mean, some amount of mimicry is inescapable in all creativity. Like all learning begins with imitation, and you pick out the phrases and the words and whatever that resonate with you, and so that's inescapable. But like, there's a difference between picking out what you like versus copying what you think is successful without any feeling of what you like. Right? I think that's just important to convey. And yeah, so even if so in the realm of like fashion, even like I think it's worth if it means wearing an outfit that everyone else thinks is ugly but you enjoy it. I think that's still preferable to, and maybe not necessarily in the moment, right? Maybe in the moment, at you end up on like a worst dressed list or something, and everyone laughs at you, whatever. But if you enjoyed it and you had fun, and it could be that 5 years from now you look back and go, oh my god, what was I thinking? But what you were thinking was that something about it was something that you liked, and it might not have been the whole thing. Like maybe the proportions are off, maybe there's something else, but there was something about it that drew it to you, and making the decision to follow through on that is the start of a path on a creative journey or an expressive journey or whatever that a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing. And it's like it's always messy and ugly in the early stages, which is why, and like, so imagine being like Shakespeare's English teacher, right? Like, or it's how frustrating it must be to be with someone who like wants to invent new words, and like just being the parent of a create like potential creative genius. Like in the early stages it's just mess, and it's just inexplicable and frustrating and chaotic, and you're just like, can you just put that shit away and we come to dinner or whatever. And some amount of that is unavoidable. But yeah, I just want to think out loud about that, because again, when you really see the big picture, it seems so obvious that that's almost the only way to do anything beautiful, right? Yeah.
It's also, there's a good Ira Glass quote about it, which I don't know off the top of my
Taste.
head, but there's also this. It kind of goes back to that idea of you're not an overnight success, right? In
Yeah.
order to develop that taste, it takes iteration. You kind of
You
keep
get, yeah, he says you get
refining.
into it because you
Yeah,
you have you love the,
you love the thing. Yeah,
yeah, and
and
and you don't live up to your own ideals because your hands haven't caught up to your eyes, right? Like
yeah,
you can
Yeah.
see something beautiful but you can't do it yet.
right.
And it's so I'm always inspired by Hokusai, the Japanese painter. Like, and today we have the wave emoji based on the great wave of Kanagawa that he painted.
Right.
And he was painting that same painting for decades, and like the earlier ones were not that great. They were like, all right, it's pretty good, but you see it took him like 30-40 years to paint the wave so beautifully. You're like, oh my god, that's amazing. But what's interesting is once you see the end product or the final whatever, I find that you can start to see the beauty in the earlier versions as well. That
Mm.
earlier you might have thought that's not very good, but later on you look back and you go, oh, there is a poetry to the imperfections that
Mhm.
you can learn to appreciate, And so now, like, I imagine that, well, now that the painter is famous and the paintings are famous, like, okay, everything associated with them is financially valuable from a like whatever perspective. But like, once you see someone's final craft, like when you see their earlier shittier version of the thing, you can appreciate it for, oh wow, this is a prototype of the later thing.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the once you see that, you're like, wait, everything is a prototype for a better thing. And so like everything shitty is also beautiful. You just don't see it yet. And so there's this proto beauty in shitty prototypes, and then you meditate on that, you reflect on it, and you start to. And I haven't gone all the way with this yet, but like I've had moments of it where you're like, wow, everything is a work in progress, and nothing, everything has like this adjacent, this
It's like
potential
potential
beauty.
energy. Like,
Exactly, yeah, right.
yeah.
And it's a function of the perceiver, right? It's really, again, like, so like beauty in the eye of the beholder. Once you
Exactly.
behold that everything is infinite, is brimming with infinite possibility, then you can't, write anybody off or anything off. And once you have that perspective and you genuinely have it, I think people can sense it and they want to be around you. They want to be like, oh wow, like, I love hanging out with this friend for coffee because they are just so non-judgmental, and it's so nice to be around them and just play and witness and think.
There's also, it reminds me too of what we were talking about, right? Like the dots connect when you look back. So it's like that first, initially, that first painting or the second painting or the 10th painting might have looked really bad, but once you see the final, you're like, this final would not have been what it is without those first, second, third, fifth, 10th iterations. Like it's almost like you develop an appreciation because you've seen the evolution. But without that body of work, you kind of, sometimes people might discount it and not take it super seriously. Yeah.
There's a couple of threads here, which is like, Visa, you talk about your future self and your past self and your present self collaborating. Everything's a project because a project is a collaboration. And even if you're not collaborating with others, you're collaborating with your future self. Um, there's this idea there where when you look at past versions, from your future self looking at your today's painting is very different from your today's self looking at your today's painting sometimes, because when you look back at prior versions, there's almost immediately a context of warmth and fondness. I'm like, oh, you baby, you led to this, you became this. It's a beautiful thing. Actually, there's a comical example of this in your introspect book where just draw the rest of the fucking rabbit or whatever that was.
Yeah.
You actually draw the rabbit,
I
right?
do it, yeah.
Yeah. Visa draws 100 rabbits, and he publishes 1, 2, 3, and 100 or something like that, or 1, 2, and 100. And yeah, like, when you just look at the first one or the second one without any context, you're like, oh, okay, I don't know how to make sense of that, and it may not look like what I expected it to. But the moment you see the evolution, it's like there's immediately a sense of fondness and warmth and, oh, you baby, you became this. It's like that sense of care that we have once we know the context, and once we know the fact that this is all time. Time is a process of manifestation and birthing and evolution, and then you can probably apply that to anything, but it comes so easily when you see the past version of yourself in the context of time. But when you see it isolated, it's sometimes a little harder to see it.
Yeah, so I love what you just said about about context, right? Like, so I think fairly early on, I came to notice that uh, people, like, we contextualize things in stories, right? And people care, like, there's a bunch of things that I observed that I was very interested in making sense of. One of the things was like and the earliest I remember this was in fiction. Like, I was reading 1001 Nights by Shahrazad, and just the sense of like so the story of Shahrazad is that, like, the husband was the king, the sultan, whatever. He's like crazy, and he's like, he would marry a new wife every day and kill her the next day so that she can't cheat on him or whatever. And he's going in, and she manages to persuade her insane king to not kill her by telling him a story every night with a cliffhanger, basically, and she does that for 1001 nights, and then he's cured of his insanity. I mean, whatever. It's when you think about this at the time when you're reading it as a kid, it's like, oh, nice or whatever. And then now you look back like, fuck, that's fucking problematic. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's very not okay. Like, but anyway, but so regardless, in both cases, the takeaway there for me was that, wow, storytelling can save your life. Like, if you can stop someone from, if you can distract someone from doing violence to you, and you get them to consider a story, you can get them invested long enough that they don't kill you. So that's kind of extreme. But like, I also noticed that a couple of other things. I noticed that people mourn the deaths of fictional characters, and they mourn, like actors and creators that they've never met or spoken to, but they've seen their work. And so like, those are all clues for me, right? Like, something about the power of story to move people. And there's a tragedy in that sometimes people feel more strongly for fictional characters than for people in their real lives. And like, why? And it's a function of story, I think. Like, we don't, like, when you get the full production of a story being told in a movie or whatever, where where it's contextualized for you, right? You just see the lightning. It's epic.
Whoa.
Yeah, there's lightning outside my window. You could see it on my.
Oh wow! While you were talking about lightning, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, right. Wild. Like, the weather changed. Like, before I started talking, there's a bright sunshine.
You manifested it, Visa.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Joked about the outcomes you wanted.
Exactly.
And the last thing, this is really, truly quite amazing. And the last thing I remember was, sometimes I watch a documentary like on Netflix or whatever, and the process. So I've watched documentaries about like a car garage, like this is restorations Gotham garage in California, where they like modify vehicles. Like, watch some stuff about like tattoo shops and like like kitchen whatever stuff. And things, you watch these documentaries, and it's very hard to not get invested in these people, and then you care about them, and like follow them on Instagram, how are they doing. Like, you just get invested,
you feel like you're friends.
Yeah, like, and it's why? It's because it's been contextualized for you, right? You see their struggle, you see what they're trying to do, you see how it's not working out, how they deal with their failure, and or like difficult conversations they have to have with one another. And it's like, it's so universal, right? Like, all creation myths tend to have like family drama intertwined with them, and part of it is, I think, just that the family drama is so universal. Everyone has a family, or even if you're like not close to your family or whatever, there's some kind of early childhood memory of like the
family
adult care for you,
yeah.
Right? And yeah, it's just its stories are just so powerful and so underappreciated even today. I feel like there's like this whole sense of, there's a storytelling class of like people, filmmakers or whatever, and then there's everyone else. Like, I think that's not, like, everyone should take a bit more responsibility, I feel, for the stories of their own lives. And I had a friend who said she went for like therapy and all kinds of stuff, but like, she said she made her most personal breakthroughs when she went for like some storytelling related, like for creative reasons. Like, she was studying, I don't know if it's filmmaking, or like she just went for like a class on something, on like character design and story design. And like, she happened to be doing some personal journaling at the side, and she's like, oh my god, like this helped me make sense of my life even more than like my therapist did. I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. So, which isn't to say that therapy is not good or whatever. It's just there's so many different ways you can make sense of things, right?
Well, and I think a lot of therapy, right, isn't that also technically, if it's done well, isn't it supposed to be about rewriting your narrative, or at least recontextualizing,
investigating?
Yeah, exactly. Like, just trying to figure out, like, I think almost everything that happens to us, we have some sort of narrative in our heads about what it was. And sometimes like healing from things is a matter of, recontextualizing and trying to understand like what that means for us in today's world. And so, this concept of storytelling, like being so powerful, is like one of my favorite things in the world. And I think I think everyone needs to know more about it, because like you can also use it for bad, right? Like a lot of times I think politicians, right, use stories for to sell they sell a story. And then once they get elected, they don't stick to that story. But it gets them elected, right? And then there's times
Correct.
where stories can like change the world and in very real ways, like make you feel like you understand someone. And to your point about the 1001 Nights visa, like it makes me think of in a lot of movies actually, right, there'll be a scene where like someone's about to kill the other person, and then right before they're about to die, they're like, I have a wife and my kid, and then they suddenly tell this like big evocative story about their son and something something something, or they'll say, I know something about you, and it's usually a story about someone they knew or something like
Yeah.
that. And then suddenly everything stops, and as the audience, we're hanging on to every word because it's a story and we also want to know the rest of it. But like,
Yeah.
it is very universal. And
What comes to mind when you say that, Vidhika, is like, I know something about you. All blackmail is a threat to tell us
tell the world a
Unsavory.
I want
story
to
that
say
you don't want out.
unfavorable, but it's almost
Yeah.
like a bad flavor. Give
Right.
the world a bad story of you.
And there's a
All blackmail
recurring
is that.
Yeah, and there's a recurring thing where like the coolest way to deal with blackmail is to like get ahead of it and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
I'll just tell the
Exactly.
truth myself. Like let me tell you what happened, and then let me tell you this really embarrassing thing, and then you admire, like, you cringe a little bit for them that such an embarrassing thing happened, but you also admire them for having the courage to step up and own it. And then, I mean, assuming it's not like a horrible thing that they did, but like just some embarrassing, and like, because everyone has some stuff that they are struggling with, whatever it is, right? Everyone has some embarrassment, some shame, some guilt, whatever. And witnessing someone else deal with it artfully can be a gift. Like, it's just, you,
Mm.
even if it's completely unrelated, like uh someone who's ashamed about something that you've never been ashamed of before, but you see them kind of like surmount it, and then you're like, oh, I have completely different issues, but their courage kind of gives me courage to try.
Mm. I have a question about that visa. So I know you talk a lot about courage and like kind of like, you can't think your way out of a courage deficit. I love that line. Admittedly, I feel like I still sometimes try to think my way out, and I know it doesn't work.
But everyone does.
But it's something that I'm like working on. I want to be able to be more courageous. And I'm curious if there was like something for you that made, like, what made it click for you that you can't think your way out of it, and or like, is there something that you mentioned sometimes hearing other people be courageous helps you be courageous, but are there any other things that you felt like really influenced your ability to be courageous, to be braver?
I feel like, so this is one of those things that I've been radicalized from a very young age about,
Mm.
like, just, so like, I feel like everyone has watched the movies, right? Like Lord of the Rings, or just any kind of heroic movie, every
Yeah.
superhero movie. Like, the difference seems to be that I take it very seriously. Like, I don't see it as, oh, we just watched a very inspiring movie, but that's a movie and then we go back to life. I'm like, no,
Mm.
like when Eowyn says to Mary, courage for our friends. We gotta, like, I felt that. I'm like, oh, like I want that. But I was reading Focusing by Eugene Gendlin,
Hmm.
Mm.
and I figured that there's actually a so the phrase "you can't think your way out of a courage deficit." I wrote it for myself in a way to kind of remind myself of like the difference between the head and the heart, in the sense, and you can't solve heart problems with head sense entirely. Like,
Mm.
you can think, oh, I have a heart problem, I have a issue with courage, and I should seek out courage. I should ask a friend for encouragement,
Mhm.
or I should, take baby steps. There's something I should do, but you still have to do something, right? And I was reading. I have a quote tweet of that first tweet where I said a kind of warmer way of saying it is, you can't think your way out of the absence of like a felt sense, and a felt sense being like,
Mhm.
just how do you feel about it? So you can't think your way out of feeling, basically,
That's
right?
right.
Right,
Like,
right.
That's right.
so if you don't know how you feel about something, you have to find that feeling. And finding that feeling is not a matter of, like, again, like, you use words a little bit. Vivek, your thoughts?
No. I was gonna say, like, yeah, you were gonna say you can't think your way out of it, but you can story tell your way into a feeling, right? Like,
Yes,
as you're
yes.
feeling something, like,
Mm.
what do you do in therapy? You're feeling
That's
something, but you're
very cool.
storytelling
Yeah, you could
about the
say it.
feeling.
Yeah, you can't
You
think your
can.
way out of feeling, meaning you can't think your way away from feeling, but you
That's right.
can think your way into feeling.
You
Like, you
can.
can, right? You can think into. Oh, that's so interesting. There's something
Because
to
that's what we're doing
explore
in
here.
therapy, right? That's what
Yeah.
I mean. That's what we're doing here, kind of like we're like one of my theories is like all words, like ultimately underneath the word is a feeling.
Yeah.
Like all words, like we
They
we
evoke
point at
feeling.
things
Yeah.
and we say, okay, let's call this sequence of sounds, and we both agree that something that feels kind of like this is this word, right?
Mhm.
That's how words are really formed. Pointing at things. Words are pointers, but really, what's underneath them is
Yeah.
something that's not a
I
pointer.
mean, that's the
I
whole
think.
concept, right? Between like connotation, denotation. Like
Right.
we're basically admitting like every word has a connotation. It's almost going to make us feel a certain way. But I do love this idea of like, yeah, you can think you can think your way into feelings. In some ways, like when you watch a movie, right? That's like you were saying, Vivek, like storytelling. That is sometimes if you think about what happened in a scene, it can make you sad, or can evoke something in
Right.
you.
And if you're feeling so, let's say something you don't have the words for it yet. You just have the feeling. You go to therapy. You're like, I'm heavy, or you talk to a friend, but you just start talking, right? Feeling can come into thought can be a helpful thing. Words, at least, can be a helpful thing there. But Visa, I think with your courage thing, what you're basically saying is you can't think your way away from feeling, and you can't. I'm also hearing like an action orient. It's a call for action, right? Ultimately,
Like you
you have
just
to
have to
act.
take risks.
You
You
have
have
to
to
act
just.
into your courage,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right?
True.
Because I actually posted about this maybe a year ago. It's like, okay, fine. So you can't think your way out of a courage deficit. Um, I tweeted saying like, okay, how are courage deficits actually solved? Okay, then what do you actually do? By feeling more or feeling less? Like, do you steel your heart against your fear and do it by feeling less, or do you feel more? So that was my real question: tapping into something we feel, or steeling ourselves against what we feel, like the fear. And there's a lot of responses there. But I think either way you go, action. I mean, I would prefer feeling more fully,
Right.
but
Yeah, I can't
also
remember
acting.
precisely what I meant when I tweeted the thing. That's a funny thing, right? Like I must have had a very specific intent
Mm.
when I first tweeted it, but now that has kind of I've lost that context,
Faded
so I
away.
get to reinterpret it. But how I would interpret it is like, I guess I would have been thinking to myself like, oh, you're thinking, like you're not. That's not helping. So it's like you can't think your way out of it. So it's like drop the thinking, like or let it like turn down the volume on the thinking, and
Mhm.
then what's left, I guess, is feeling, and then from there, once you feel it, then you can address it in some way. So it's what you're saying. Yeah, it's basically.
It's funny because you actually did respond to that tweet, Visa,
What is it?
a couple months after that, and you said by taking action,
Yeah.
doing
Okay.
stuff at the edge of
That
your
too.
comfort zone,
That's also
right?
true. Yeah.
Because I feel like the original context of what you're saying is you can't think of your way out of a courage deficit is basically you can't. I mean, forgive my phrasing, but you can't just jerk around in the corner. You can't just jerk off about, oh my god, I'm gonna do this. You have to at some point you're gonna have to do things, right? You're not gonna get out of the whole thing without like you have to step into the arena at some point. Like it might be a different version of it. It might be like a moderated version of what you're thinking you have to do. It might take a tiny step, but there's no way out but through
Yeah.
the action of the thing.
It's
Right?
it's almost like it has to be embodied. It's like there's a Maya Angelou quote about like she talks about courage being like it's one of the ones I really
Prime
liked.
virtue, right?
It's the
It's
Say
the
mother
that
of all
again?
virtue by which you
virtues.
enact all other virtues.
Yeah, exactly,
Mother
exactly.
of
And
all other
she,
virtues. Yeah.
yeah, which I just think is so like it makes a lot of sense. And she talks about too like courage being a muscle and how like it's you start with the baby weight. You start with something really light, and then you get a little bit. Then you're like, oh, I can lift 5 pounds. Okay, now let me try 10. Okay, now let me try. And it's almost like the more you lift, the more you're able to, and then you can become more courageous. Which also makes me wonder if the flip side is true. If you don't take if you kind of stop doing courageous acts for a while, does that mean your courage muscle atrophies, or does it stay?
I think it can atrophy a little bit, but like that's just such an interesting way of framing it. Yeah, does it atrophy? I think it can, but it's like it's similar to fitness. It's probably like if you've done it in the past, picking it back up should be easier than if you've never
Yes.
done it. Right.
Yeah, it's because your body has that muscle memory maybe, and
Right.
you've had
Yeah.
those reps,
You have
so
a
you're like
courage
rusty.
memory, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny because courage seems so many things in life are domain specific, right? But courage, like if you just read the rest of that Maya Angelou quote, what she says is like, courage is the mother of all virtues because without courage, you can't
practice
practice any
anything
of the
else
other virtues
consistently.
consistently. You might be able to practice a virtue now and then, inconsistently apply it, but to apply your other virtues consistently, like any other virtues in any other domain,
Right.
like you're going to have to. So basically, courage is this almost, it transfers across domains. If you can be brave in one way, you can, I mean, whether you can immediately have the same level of skill in another area is a different question, but you have the memory that I was brave here, right? And I didn't die. And
I think, yeah,
I can do you almost having the memory again. I think this plays into that future self, past self context. Once you've seen that, oh wait, I did this, your whole idea of yourself is different. Like, oh, I'm the guy who did that fucking really scary thing, and your entire self definition can change. And going into a new domain with that self definition, I think it transfers, but more importantly, you're a different person. You're the person who did that thing in a different domain. Does that make sense?
and yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense because especially like you're saying, like your self definition is changing, and part of that is because I think with each courageous act, however it turns out, right? Like we talked about this a little bit before, but however it turns out, that like, oh, hey, I did this, I didn't die, I'm still fine. In fact, I might feel even better about myself. I might feel more confident. Like I just did a hard thing, and sometimes it feels good, to do that. And so I think that confidence becomes a part. It's like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it doesn't matter which domain so much. I almost feel like that courage, that confidence that you build from being courageous in one domain, you take that confidence into, the next domain. So whatever it is, you can kind of like reapply that. And it's like I was going to say, it's like device agnostic. It's like a field agnostic or something,
Yeah, I think it's definitely true for courage. Confidence, maybe, I could see myself being very, very unconfident in one domain.
Yeah.
After having been confident in a different one. But courage, I feel like even just a memory and even just being the person who did that thing, I think it carries over a little.
And I should be specific when I say confidence. I more mean like I think being courageous. My hypothesis is that like being courageous can help you build confidence in like your own gut, like in yourself. Not so much like, oh, I'm confident at math or I'm confident at this very specific in this domain, but more so like I'm confident that I'm the kind of person that can be courageous and kind of keep going,
For sure. This reminds me, Visa, one of my favorite quotes in your, not even a quote, it's almost like your framing of this issue of, okay, you could live a life where you're not trying. It's your life. You can do that. But I wonder if you're not lying to yourself. I wonder if you should try to gain your own self-respect, right? That's one of my favorite phrases in that book, because it's not that I haven't heard the idea before, but that's what happens when you do an act of courage or something is really like, regardless of the outcome, you've just gained a massive amount of self-respect, right? You've bought your own reverence in some sense, and the relationship between the inner tyrant and the inner whatever, the opposite of the inner tyrant, like that is almost, it becomes a little weaker, right? You've gained more sovereignty.
Yes.
So much more sovereignty by even a small act of courage, as long as it scares you.
Right.
I mean, you're a different person in that sense because you have a different relationship between yourself and yourself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. That's true. I'm reminded of so in the TV show Sense8, there's this scene where when two friends, so it's like a flashback scene for a guy and his friend, like his friend is in hospital, but like when they were kids, there was a time where he was getting bullied by, well, okay, it goes further back. So they were watching Conan on TV, I think, or like some at TV show. And there's a quote that's like, "No one will remember if we were good men or bad, only that two stood against many." It's like they were watching that on the TV or whatever. And then later on, one of the characters is getting like bullied and beaten by like this whole group of kids, and the other kid comes running with like a some, I don't know why, he comes to his defense and he starts attacking all the others and chases the rest of them off. And then he repeats the quote. He's like, "No one will remember if we were good men or bad, only that two stood against many." And in that moment, you can't help but love the kid. You're just like, "Oh my god, like I would do anything for this child. Like it's just that he's willing to he heard an idea, he believed in it, and he put his heart and his life, right, or his body in on the line to enact what seemed noble and good for his friend, right? And yeah, it's just and I guess when I talk about self-respect, I'm like, how can you kind of be there for you in that way, like put yourself on the line for yourself, right? In that sense. And yeah, I do feel like it probably all comes back down to fear and self-preservation. So what I've come around to, so in my earlier days, I guess I used to feel almost anger and disdain and frustration towards the part of me that felt cowardly. But now I think of it as, well, even the coward is just trying to live, it's just trying to not die,
Trying to
not get
survive.
hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So and now I feel
Oh my God.
a kind of a sweet sadness and a love and a, there's a bit of, I wish you could have courage too, but I'm not gonna be cruel and tyrannical again. So it's like when you see how it all loops back, right? Like the courageous person, like the courageous actor, like the warrior. And so in King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, there's a part about this, about tyrant kings, right? Like and not like comically tyrant to the point where they are villains, but like even the good king can veer into a bit of tyranny when he gets frustrated by like the cowardice of his men or his people, right? Like it's like and it's very challenging but rewarding if you can kind of, and there's so much to get into that. Like the way that the video I saw, the guy said, the coward on the front lines, is like the shadow of the general sees his frontline soldiers being cowards, and he gets angry at them, but he's really angry at himself. Like
For
it's a
not being out
reflection,
there.
right? Yeah. And so the general hasn't gone like all the way to I guess full enlightenment or whatever, I mean, but like there's this achievable state where you see that um even though you want to encourage the brave and support and challenge them, that doesn't mean you should be cruel and hateful towards the not brave, because they whether they're unwilling or they're unable, for some reason they can't do what the courageous can. But like, if you are cruel to them, again, because no one person is one thing or the other, right? We all have
Exactly.
gray areas, we all have areas
No.
in which we are brave, areas in which we're not so brave. And like, if you enforce the separation of the two, there's a something bad happens when you do that. There's a cost to it. It's never without cost. And so the challenge, I'm still processing this myself as well, but like, it seems that the challenge there is like my latest personal innovation in trying to, how do I kind of encourage people to be great and pursue that, like, do all those things, but not accidentally, inadvertently, like
Like
shit on people who are struggling.
Yeah.
Because and one reminder is that we are all like one accident or one grace, event away from becoming unable to do what we do, right? Like, it's just fate, and life is the vicissitudes of life can screw you up in some way that you can't say. So there's a sense of support and encourage those who are able, but be kind to those who are not, right? Like the mercy for those who can't do it.
it almost sounds like there's a sense of like, it almost sounds like you're touching, not explicitly, but on the fringes of like forgiveness and like grace. Like, I wonder if it takes courage to forgive someone, right? And sometimes more courage to forgive yourself. That's even harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts here. One is that, first of all, the idea of, first of all, I should say this framing of courage, where like so much framing around courage is like the coward and this guy feel the same fear. The coward's the one, the coward's the one who, the courageous person and the coward feel the same fear, and the courageous person is the one who acts. But there's an essentializing going on there, right?
Yeah.
Like the coward is like this, and the courageous person is like this, where actually the courageous person contains the coward within him.
Yes.
And the coward contains the courageous person within him. Right?
Yes.
We're we contain multitudes. That's why we feel like, oh, I could do something, right? I like the potential of courage arises because we're not essential human beings. We're complex human beings. So first of all, I love that you're trying to explore that, because most of the writing around courage, all these quotes essentialize it in some way. The other thing I wanted to say is like how much this resembles the rabbit drawings. Like, yes, the coward or the guy who doesn't take action is basically drawing number 2. Like, you have no idea how it's the same person who's going to take action later. But if you're cruel towards drawing number 2, you'll never get the drawing number 3, 4, 20, 50. The 20th time or the 50th time you're presented with an opportunity, will you take action? I don't know. Maybe you will, right? You have no idea. You're an evolving person, and the way you frame it, it almost makes you feel compassion to this version of yourself that may or may not take action, but that you know that you want to. It also allows for the possibility that for you to admit yourself. Half of courage is admitting to yourself that you want to take action, right? A lot of the time you're like, no, it's fine. It's not for me. It's like, but you're rationalizing away the fear of doing something.
It's almost like the rabbits thing. It's like the courage to some extent. Maybe courage is also to keep going, right? Sometimes courage is not. I think sometimes when we talk about courage, we think of like a battleground or like something very dramatic, maybe. But sometimes courage is just drawing rabbit number 3 and number 4 and number 5 and continuing. And it's kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like when it comes to people's journeys seem like, oh wow, you're already so successful, but really it's like, no, you had the courage to like put in that mundane work day after day after day, knowing that and hoping that it'll compound and that at some point it'll pay off. Not knowing for sure, but kind of having faith in that. So
I want to do a quick time check. It's probably like midnight for you, Vidhika. What time is it for you?
Getting close to midnight. Yeah. 7
like
minutes away.
Yeah. So maybe we can wrap up soon. I just wanted to ask Visa, like, is there anything that comes to mind for what you're thinking about now, that are, what are you excited about? Any kind of areas that are top of mind for you? What are you excited about, writing wise or otherwise? Ideas that you're mulling on?
I mean, so writing is the main thing in my life, and I have spent so I published my second book in February last year, and it's been basically a year since, and I've basically spent the entire year just thinking about like the essays that I want to write next, and I have a lot of drafts and notes and stuff all over the place, and I'm tweeting all the time. But like I do feel like the time is ripe for me to translate and update a lot of my thinking and my ideas and perspectives into longer form essays. And that's the main thing I'm excited about. I feel like there's something. I mean, I would be writing essays at some point, no matter what. But like, I started out writing essays as a teenager, and then I guess when Twitter started to blow up for me, I cut back on the essays to focus on tweeting a lot every day, and I have no regrets about that. I feel like it really helped me in so many ways. But like, yeah, I'm excited to consolidate my knowledge or my perspectives and to try and make it more accessible to more people, right? Because Twitter is not super reader friendly for like someone who doesn't use Twitter, and it's like, what is this quote tweet? Do I click on that? It's kind of confusing. But like a Substack essay, for example, it's just, okay, you start reading here and just keep reading, and then it's done. Like there's a more, you can show it to your grandma, right? Like, and so yeah, I'm excited to get my perspectives and ideas out to more people. And not even that. I mean, so even if it's just for myself, like I'm excited to kind of have artifacts of thought that have a start and have an end, and take people on specific journeys, and it's fun. I mean, there's somebody once, some painter apparently once said, when they asked him like, why do you paint, and they were expecting like some answers about like, create like just whatever, and he said, oh, I like the smell of paint. Right? And like they were expecting something profound, like beauty and whatever. And yeah, I'm similar. Like I like the taste of words. I like how they feel
I
coming out
like
of my
that.
fingers. And so I mean, and everything else as well. But like that's part of it. So I do feel like uh I like my books. Both of my books are good in my opinion. My second book is much better than the first. But not asking people to buy a book is a pretty big request.
Mm.
And so I've kind of haven't had um direct. I mean, I've had feedback on my books, but like, I mean, so if like I just shipped an essay that was pretty good, I think. It's called "Are You Serious?" And
Mm.
it's a lot of it is what we've talked about today. Like, like, are you serious about what you love? Are you putting
Mm.
in the work, climbing the mountain, whatever? Are you listening to your taste? Are you joking about the outcomes you want? Blah blah blah. And it's resonated a lot with a bunch of people. Like people are saying, "Oh, it's my favorite essay, one of my favorite essays ever."
Mm.
I'm like, "Oh, that's very sweet." And it's also for me, it's like this is one of the first few essays I have in mind of like 50 to 100 essays I want to write. So
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
very excited about just getting that out to people, getting that out of myself, right? And like I want to delete a lot of my notes. I think uh uh creative output is like a home for all of the things you love. And when you have all your loves in like random notes here and there, it's like harder to keep track of. But once it's almost like building an altar for all of your talismans and all your deities and whatever. You put them all in one place, and then you can kind of,
Mm.
yeah. So there's something beautiful about that, and I'm just very excited to make progress on that. Yeah, rambling a lot.
This reminds me a ton, by the way, of Vivek was earlier telling me we were talking about the word parishan. You know how you told me the meaning, what Visa just said about like everything being scattered and taking all of that and making it something. So yeah, I don't know. That's I don't know if you want to explain that, Vivek, better than I.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, no, Vidhika and I were talking before, and we were talking about being nervous and being anxious, and when you hit record on anything,
Mhm.
and there's this Hindi word called pareshan. It's like, oh, I'm troubled, and Vidhika was like, that's usually used colloquially for, oh, I'm troubled. But it comes from this Persian word called, the same thing, parishani. Parishan which actually means, in some sense, I'm not a Persian expert, but it means scattered, right? There's a scattered quality to it. I'm all over the place is literally what it means. And so I think, Vidhika, what you're saying is like, oh yeah, collating your
Yeah.
scatteredness together. In fact, in some ways, Visa, like your innovation with Twitter has a lot to do with that, right? It's collation and
Hmm.
threading is a way to organize and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
bring scattered things together and bring
I had a
organization.
conversation with a friend in like 2018, and I remember this because I've threaded it, right, where we both agreed, like we're both kind of very online writers, and we both know of people who complain that the internet has ruined our attention spans, and back in the day we used to write novels and now we don't. And we were both like, fragmentation is not a intrinsically bad thing. Like
That's right.
it allows us to see more, do like there's a lot of the real problem is that there's a lack of how I describe it as a lack of threading, or a lack of contextualizing of all the fragments.
Mhm.
But that's a skill that we can develop. So and then I kind of go off the rails about how just even a book is just a thread of chapters, a chapter is just a thread of paragraphs, a paragraph is a thread of sentences, a sentence is a thread of words. And you can thread anything in any way you like, however you like it. Like you can at any point rearrange the objects in your life, on your desk, on your like your Vidhika, your bookshelf looks gorgeous, right? Like, and yeah, both of you, like my place is a mess, but like both of you have like this nice bookshelf behind you.
Don't worry, this
uh,
side is messy. So
Same.
yeah. And but regardless, like, so it's just I wouldn't describe myself as religious growing up, but like the idea of having like an altar space in your home, just the principle of that, I think is interesting and
Mm.
beautiful. And we can do that in so many dimensions. And it's all connected. I want to write essays about this, but it's just the sense of attending to, again, right? Like, so you have fragments all over the place. You don't have to feel bad about being fragmented. You can just connect the dots, and you can just choose for yourself the path that you want to weave through the fragments. And then once you can see a path and you honor that path, that becomes, it's no longer fragmented because now you've drawn a thread through it, and it's like, you know,
So
what does
almost like
Krishna say? Yeah, the universe is a thread of pearls. Yeah,
Thread of pearls. Yes. Yeah.
strung
Absolutely.
around.
You've story told, like threading is storytelling.
Yeah.
It's the proto subroutine
creating a
under
narrative,
storytelling.
right? Of like, if you think of even a book, right? Like you were saying, it's chapters. Everything is modular, but when you string the words together, it's a sentence. When you string the sentences together, they're paragraphs, and that's how yeah, they're all building blocks to new information architectures. And I think that's the hard part, though, is that like figuring out like what is the right way to organize the information. And I think I know for me,
every
that's
attempt, every method that you try will have some failure mode or some.
there's
You
just
can
a
never
bunch
do
of
everything.
trade-offs.
Right? I sometimes think of it as like, imagine you have a city, and a city with like with a history and everything, and you have one day to show a friend around the city. Like, you can't show them everything. You can't even. So let's say there's like, it's a food paradise and there's like 100 different things to eat. You can't stuff them with all 100 things. Then you have to choose, right? You have to, There's always editorial decisions you have to make, and the best you can hope for is maybe you just try and show them a few of your favorite things and hope that they want to come back next time and check out more, right? Because you can't stuff a city into a person in a day. Right? You have to experience it over time to build your own.
You should tweet that. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
So
funny
true.
idea. Yeah. No, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to say is just that editorial decision, or even just like rearranging or reconfiguring. That's an act of tremendous agency. It's more than you might imagine, right? And more than you might think, and sometimes can make you feel very sovereign.
And editorial decisions are also expressions of taste, and in some ways you're paying attention, right? Act of love. Like there's a lot, I feel like, embedded in every editorial decision, whether or not it feels as weighty in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I was just going to ask all three of us, what is and maybe that can be like a closing type of question. Is there, so Vidhika, also you, I wanted you to take a turn, me to take a turn also on what we're excited about, what we're thinking, but also maybe just what's on the courage, what's on the edge of our courage zone, right? What is being courageous look for us right now? So maybe I can go first, actually, since I asked it. You guys can think about it.
Be courageous.
No, it's no, but just like yeah. So what I'm excited about? I'm excited a lot about. So this summer I read Visa's book. I was on like a internet fast, digital fast in some senses, but I'm playing a lot with the word sovereignty. Sovereignty is what I want to like. That's in the level of a nervous system sovereignty, not being dissociated, being willing to inhabit my own life and inhabit my own story. That's the most courageous thing for me right now. I've done a lot of outwardly courageous things, being on stage, taking action, being public speaking. All those things are well within my comfort zone. But really, I think inward, a sense of inhabiting my own life, not escaping it in some sense, or just be attending to the parts that I'm escaping, and being more loving of myself internally. That's actually on the edge of my courage thing. That's one, and that's what I'm excited about mostly. And the other thing is like doing this. It's funny, like an hour ago, I think we were talking about notice when you're doing, what do you do when you're not doing what you're supposed to do? And we're also talking about you need to like the thing you're doing, and notice when you like it, even if the process is hard or whatever. There's some outcome that you like. Notice when you like it. The moment, I think Visa was saying, notice when you like it, that very moment I was just noticing my internal state at that time, and I was like, I fucking love this. Like I want to do this. I want to do a lot of this. I want to talk, and I want to share that with the world. That's not, that it comes very easily to me, and it's something I'm very gravitated towards. But it's an act of courage for me to put something out, because I've always been scared to do that. Been scared to put things out because I cringe at that's not me. That's not me. That makes me, I contain multitudes. This makes me sound too serious. This makes me sound too joking. I'm using my American accent in this, not my Indian accent. Oh, this, like, There's so many reasons why I'm not, oh, people are going to see this and assume I'm this, and I'm not that. But at some point I have to act, just to be courageous and allow the people who would reject me to reject me, allow my own self to cringe and not abandon myself when I do it. I think that's kind of the biggest signal in courage very often. When you take the act of courage, the reason your sovereignty increases is that you've signaled to yourself that you didn't abandon yourself when, when
you had your own back.
Yeah, you had your back in some sense. So yeah, so those two would be my biggest things: inner sovereignty and putting conversations out into the world.
I can go, I guess. I don't have anything as well defined, I think, but I was, I've been thinking a lot about I've always been really obsessed with the idea of like serendipity and the power of like human connection and all that kind of stuff. And I've known this for a while, that I'm like obsessed with those things, as well as like storytelling and words. And I feel like I have a lot of these obsessions that I want to like talk to everyone about and I'll collect notes about, but I don't do anything. Speaking of courage, I haven't been courageous about actually like taking action. So I think for me, in terms of like this year, like one, I want to be more courageous. I want to, in action, not just to say it, and I want to try to put myself in situations that will allow for more serendipity where possible. I mean, I think there's, the whole idea of like engineered serendipity to some extent. And I also really want to get better at just kind of like enjoying, like I've always been a big fan of like the little things, and like I marvel in like the tiniest details sometimes. And I want to get better at like not procrastinating like small joys, which sounds so cheesy, but it really is true. Like I was telling Vivek earlier about like, I have like stationery that I have saved from when I was like literally a child. I used to write letters to my cousins. I used to write letters to my cousins because I have cousins that live in like India and Australia and Hungary and everywhere. And my mom used to make us write letters. And so I was very fond of like nice pens and nice, paper and stuff. But I was so particular about not wanting to waste. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to use this nice paper for someone's birthday, or I'm going to use this for, and so I hung on to it, and now it's been 20 some years. And I recently found some of that stuff digging through things at my mom's place. And I was just like, why do I still have this? So I just want to get better at like not depressed, because younger me, I sort of deprived. I thought I was sacrificing for a better day, and I should have just used the nice paper and the nice pens. Like now I'm not that excited about whatever teddy bears are on that piece of paper, and they're literally, they're like bears on it. And so like, yeah, I think I want to get better at just like when I notice something that makes me happy, instead of being like, oh, this is so nice, let me use it 3 weeks from now. Those 3 weeks may never come. Not that I'm necessarily going to like die and not be able to use them, but I just might not have that, what you're drawn to changes over time, right? As our taste evolves. And I want to be able to exercise that excitement in the moment. So I want to get better at that. And then in terms of like actions, I think I've been saying I want to write for like literal years, and I still have not written a single essay in like, I don't know how long, maybe since I was young. And I think it's because I'm scared. I think I'm scared. Like I see so many, especially on Twitter, there's so many people whose writing I just admire. They're just so talented. You know what I mean? Like Visa, you're obviously one of them, but there's so many like writers that I'm just like, oh my God, you just string words like magic. And so I think part of it is I'm like, oh, there's so many good writers already in the world. Like, what am I going to add? And then there's a sense of, I think I have good ideas, but then I get stressed out about how to communicate those ideas. Like in talking, this is easy for me. Like I don't, well, maybe not the recording part, but the talking part is easy for me, at least expressing ideas. But writing those ideas out feels, I don't know. It's not my natural mode, I guess. And so writing text to a friend, that's like super duper easy, and I don't even think about it. And sometimes those are essays. But, it's very different when I feel like, maybe it's similar to my fear of being recorded. It feels like if even one other person is going to read it, that's not the only person that's going to read it, it feels more scary. So yeah, I'm hoping to start writing either essays and or poetry, or I don't know, stuff like that.
Nice. You should totally do it. Yeah, it's. I
Yeah,
mean, there's not much to say beyond that. Like, it's just, you know,
yeah.
it's
I just
worth
gotta
doing.
do it.
I mean, I think earlier you said something about like there's already so many good writers, but like there's never enough. You know, like every person who contributes to, I mean, even if it's like just for themselves, right? Like just every creative act is a. I mean, the quote that's been sticking to me from Andor, which is like a like the rebel. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere. You
Mhm.
know,
Mm,
so like, and every creative act is a rebellion against, you know, an uncaring world where everything
mm,
has to be utilitarian and you know, mass market and like fuck
Mhm.
that. Like just do
mm,
what you want for yourself, for your friends, and if there's better stuff out there, whatever, you know. Sometimes, you know, like I remember when I was a kid and I used to read like Marcus Aurelius or like, you know, any like very wise, very profound thinkers and philosophers like Aristotle, I don't know, whatever. Like you read some Emerson, right? Some grand author, and they're like, here's my wisdom, and they're so wise, like, oh wow, like yes. At the same time, they seem so far away from me. You know, they seem
mm,
like I'm this little boy and they are like godly men
mhm.
and like heroic, you know, like I can try and learn from them, but I don't feel like I'm one of them, you know, like they are
Mm.
so
You feel
abstract and
farther ahead. Yeah.
right. And what I wanted was to read someone who also cares about them, but isn't them, but is
Mm,
someone, you know, who's like me, but like 3 steps ahead, you know, like a
mm,
year, 2, 3 years ahead, right? And I realized over the years that I have been that person for
Mm.
my
mm,
like I have appreciated reading, you know, like about someone's fitness journey when they are not super fit yet.
Mhm.
Because again, like
mm.
once like fitness tips from Serena Williams, like okay, like cool, ma'am,
Like not relatable.
like
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm sure it's all correct, but like you know, it's aspirational, but like you wanna someone who you see and hey, they're just like me, but they're better, and like when
Mm,
Mhm.
like and they're like, oh, you know, after you do your chores or whatever, like their life experience is more relatable, and
Mhm.
so their work is valuable, and so whoever you are that person for someone else.
mm,
Even if you're like a complete beginner, and complete beginners can actually be useful to experts because experts spend so much time hanging out with other experts that they don't remember what it's like to be a beginner. So like
mhm.
anybody can be of use to anybody else by just being honest in their self-reporting or their writing or whatever.
Mm.
Because
Um,
their writing inhabits their own context, which they
right.
don't, which others don't have.
Right.
Yes, your context is valuable, whatever it is, even if it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like, oh, I'm not an Oscar winning. Like, yeah, that's still whatever your perspective is. That's a valuable perspective.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, my courage thing is it goes back to my writing again. It's like I want to have the courage to really kind of actually it's similar to what you're saying about the wrapping paper. Like I have all these notes and stuff, and it's all like, oh, one day this will be a part of some book that I'm gonna write. One day this is gonna be a part of some creative project. Like yes, but also if I lay it all out on the field, like if I challenge myself to like get all this stuff out, what I'm curious to know what I will start doing once I have done everything that I've set out to do. Right? I want
Mm,
that freedom. I want the freedom to be, oh, I've done everything I want to. Like, I mean, not and maybe not every single book idea I have is a book. I don't think that's possible. Like, there's too many
mhm.
book ideas. But maybe I
You have
could,
to prioritize. Yeah.
yeah, like simplify it and like this could be a book maybe, but I'll ship it as an essay or I'll ship it as a tweet or whatever. Like just
Mm,
get it all out of my system so that
yeah.
I can be fresh to kind of be in the world without like editorializing
Mm,
it. You know, I want to.
yeah.
I look forward to that. I do feel like it's
Mm,
maybe not completely possible. Like there's a sense in which I'm kind of yearning for like an inbox zero, and like people say, you
Mm.
know, you want it, but like it's not entirely realistic because you're gonna get new emails anyway. Inbox zero is not really about the literal zero in your inbox.
Right.
It's a state
yeah.
of mind, right? It's a way of feeling on top of your things, but not burdened to and beholden to them. And yeah, I just want to reflect on that. I think it does feel like something that takes courage to be like, oh yeah, I'm okay with this. You know, I'm happy where I am. Whatever I'm not happy about, I'm gonna address, and like I'm just in the zone of
Mm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Inbox zero also almost is the value of it is in the directionality and the sense of motion and the sense of being on top of it because you're moving, not because you're in a particular state.
Yes.
And it sounds like the sense of, one thing you said, Visa, is like bogged down. Like I think some of it's in the sense of lightness, right? In box zero there's a sense of lightness. There's a sense of like, I can be present with like anything that comes in, I can actually respond to because I'm not worrying about the 50 things I haven't yet responded to. I've never been an inbox zero person myself in the literal sense at all, not even figurative sense. But that's something that I'm realizing too is, what you were talking about, Visa, is like being present in the world. Like, I think that's maybe, I almost feel like this sounds like a really weird thing to say, but it's almost like the ideas are like, it feels like they're taking up too much space in my brain and I'm not allowing new things to seep into my brain because I'm like, oh, but I haven't written about these 6 things that are arresting me and just
Your
really,
cup is
really
full
important.
in some sense.
Yeah, I know
that seems exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not, I know that's not technically how it works. Neuroplasticity exists, et cetera, but like in the sense that that's how it almost feels like this hasn't metabolized yet. Like I need to get rid of what is in my brain before I can start being excited about.
I feel it. Yeah, it's totally. I think Richard Feynman had a quote that's about like, you have a bunch of questions that you carry with you over time, and then you accumulate answers and perspectives on those questions, and over time that looks like wisdom, or it looks like knowledge or genius or whatever. It's just you've just been sitting with the questions for a long time, and some questions are like very, very open and like you can just carry them like with you forever. But some questions I think are more localized or more context specific, and while you do continue to develop richness around those like localized questions, it does kind of I don't know what's the right, it doesn't, it's empty your cup thing. Like it starts filling up your capacity, and it becomes the frames through which you're looking at things. And then it's like, oh, I have 12 frames, and every day I look through these 12 frames. And for a while they expand your perspective, because initially you're looking through like whatever your default frame was, and now you have 12 new frames to look things through. But eventually those new ways of seeing become like new sets of blinders, and you at some point need to kind of break it all and start over from scratch, I think, or whatever is the case. What you're describing it's a very real experience. I felt, and the relief I think really comes from publishing stuff, or like having output of some kind that you can trust.
Yeah.
I can't explain to you how much throughout this call, how often I've had this. I should have started this 6 years ago, right? Doing this, I'm like,
Right.
I mean,
Now.
like I get it. I mean, my friends and family have really grown tired of me saying, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start, like, whatever that is, whether this is a podcast or a talk show or whatever. It's ossified. There's an ossification that can happen with. Earlier you were talking about like you want to be able to say you've done it without editorializing. Like I don't know what you meant by that, but it feels like you're meaning something like you don't have to caveat. Like I did it. It's over. You're almost not caveating that. It'll be sometime in the future. It's not there. It's
right.
It's done.
And to some extent, we put more pressure on ourselves, right, Vivek? Like for me, I think because I've waited so long to write a single essay, now I'm like, well, but I've waited 7 years and I've been wanting to do this for eons. Now the first one has to be amazing. It's almost like I've put more pressure on myself.
No,
now that you've waited
there's
so
a simple
long.
solution to this. Do it bad on purpose. So it's
Yeah,
like,
you know what? It's like the thing that you were talking about the songs. Yeah, maybe I should just
That's what I
do. Decide to do shitty, bad things on purpose, and be like, I'm gonna write 12 bad essays or 12 whatever. Like,
challenge
and then
to myself.
you will accidentally write a good one. It's always like that.
That's true.
So,
it's almost
really,
helping free the inner critic, right? Like ultimately what you're doing by that.
Yeah, you're there. We can still hear you audio wise.
Yeah, your face is frozen, but I can hear you, I think.
I think I lost connection.
You're here.
Okay, sorry. I don't know if I think those.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think a lot of it is just needing to tell the inner critic, like, you don't have to worry about it being bad. If I'm doing it bad on purpose, oh, cool, then I just have to write words. But Vivek, I was going to say, it's probably, I don't know if it feels similar to you, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's an element of like, oh, but I've waited this long now. I have to make sure it's good, whatever it is I do,
Of course. I mean, that's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the compounding pressure of like, I have very, very silly and inappropriate idea that's coming to mind. Like Back to stupid pickup artists. There's this idiotic thing called the 3-second rule. When you see someone really attractive, you should
Right.
approach them like in 3 seconds.
Immediately, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise you'll just talk yourself like, oh no, I need to come up with this. I need to. Okay, sorry for the terrible example, but there is a mimetic truth to it. You just do. Do. In improv, the same thing. The moment you think of an idea, go say it. Otherwise, somebody else will tag in, or the scene will go like it's alive for a second. The opportunity is alive for a second or 10 seconds or something like that. Just go.
I would say this is true. Even now with my writing, like it's very hard to explain to people and even to my wife, like because she lives with me, right? But it's like I will have. So I have my whole body of like my city worth of notes, right? Like I have all these sprawling. Must be like 500,000 words at this point, but like I can't really write
By the
an
way,
essay,
including or excluding your tweets.
It's like half. I'm not sure.
Wow,
it's a lot.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
but like while I have all that junk lying around, I very seldom can be like, oh, I'm gonna wake up today and I'm gonna write this essay that I have on my plan or in my mind. Like I can try. It will be decent. It can be pretty good. I'm probably being a bit harsh on myself when I say it, and I don't say it's great. But like all of my good shit, it always happens. It's like lightning, really. It really happens. Something triggers me in some way. Like someone says something, and I'm like, I have just the thing for you for that, or I have somebody does something wrong, and I'm like, oh my god, let me tell you what you should have done instead. Like whatever. There's something, or it's like I'm in the shower and I'm like, oh, you know what? Oh shit, and then the window of opportunity I have to get that out is very very short. It's like a minute. Like there's a if I can start on that minute and hold it, it can go like the number of times I like so people see the things I've done and they're like, oh wow, these are like you wrote a good essay, that's nice. And I'm like, the number of times I was kind of in the zone and got started and then got distracted or got blown out. Like, oh my god, it outnumbers like 99 to 1, So it's like there's this whole graveyard of half written, and I'll see the things that I remember, like the first paragraph I wrote. I was so inspired when I started, and then some shit happened, and I lost it, and then I come back. I'm like, I can remember the feeling I had, but I can't re-inhabit it right now. But I keep it because the feeling will come back around eventually somewhere. Yeah, it's something about context, something about feeling, and
this
even.
Is... Sorry, I was just gonna say this is so resonant. This is so like it just feels like I mean obviously I haven't written essays, but like even just tweets, I've noticed there's times where like if a tweet like sometimes some of them are a little more thought out, but a lot of times it happens if I'm not like in a meeting at work and something makes me really angry, or or I'm having a conversation with someone and something is really cool. Like if it happens in that moment, I feel like it just comes out authentic because it's brimming with energy. And I've noticed it also they tend to seem to resonate more with people, and it's not by design. It's just something I just want to get out of my system. But I think there's something in probably the way that the words come together because of that emotion that's kind of inhabiting you, to use your word, Visa. Like it is so cool. And I think that is one of the reasons writing is super hard for me. Like the few times that I have had moments of like, oh my god, I want to write this, is sometimes it is when I'm in the midst of something where I cannot leave, or sometimes it's 3 a.m. in the morning and then I jot down a thought, then I'm like, I should really go back to sleep, so yeah.
There's this idea of being possessed by that.
Yeah, it is. I really that is my experience. It really is. I don't even feel like, so there's, and musicians have said similar things. I think sports people have also said similar. It's like your best work, it doesn't feel like you did it, like you were there and it happened.
You're almost like possessed by something, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and so there even I think there's like this movement to I was just reading about this, something about it's half of, I don't know if it's like how serious it is or half a joke, but it's like a movement to stop applause, like saying you shouldn't applaud like performances, because, and it's by the performers themselves, and they're like, I don't really want your applause, like it feels weird, like to some subset of performers. And I think the way to think about it is, while you might not feel like you are the magician doing the magic, you are like the custodian of the magician, and you have to, our job is like as the manager / janitor / mom to like handle all the paperwork and all the. So it's like we enable the creative genius to flourish, and but we are not that. Like whatever it is that wherever it is that creative genius comes from, it seems to be, and you can get like spiritual about it, or you can get, like, oh, it's the shared language community space. Like earlier we were talking about how like words have feelings associated with them, and it's like it's not in you. It's partially in you, but it's not like there isn't a single like library of feelings. It's with all people. It's like consensus. It's an ongoing thing. And yeah, where am I going with this? It's just the idea of it's just so different than our kind of modern atomized um, kind of Excel spreadsheet perspective on things. Like there's something about creative work that taps into something deeper that is resonant with across peoples. It's very magical, It's very like and I remember of like a science a quote about a scientist saying like when you drink from the cup of knowledge or whatever, like you start out as an atheist and like God is at the bottom waiting for you, something like that. And like similarly, like it's very difficult to pursue creativity, I think, and not end up kind of in awe at, again, not necessarily supernatural, but like the limits of our thinking brain, or like our like again, like what you were saying earlier about how like when you're in the zone and you're really feeling it, like people can tell from your writing, even though if you cut up any one sentence and you look at the series of words, like it's just a series of words. Like how is it that some particular series of words just have the life to them? I can't tell you. I've been writing for 20 years. I can't tell you what it is precisely. I can tell you when I feel it. You can tell we can all feel it when we feel it. But like when you like dissect it, it doesn't review you can reduce it to rules, but you can't use the rules to generate the things. Right? I think yesterday I saw a friend say, rationalists explain to me, where do hypotheses come from?
Yes.
It's like it's hunch. It's a guess. There's no spreadsheet approach to guessing. Like it's a feeling, it's a sense, it's something.
It's almost like you can analyze it after the fact. It's kind of like how we were talking about how you can think your way out of a feeling, but you can't. You can think your way into a feeling, but not out of one. And so like, it's like you can analyze how these words came together, but you can't use analysis to make the words sound the way they necessarily.
There's an irreducible component to it, which is again, it's like people who say there's no mystery in the modern world, like try writing, try making something. Like you will be humbled very quickly.
Yeah,
there's no world without I mean, the word world itself, it's just abstraction slapped on top of mystery. In the Persian story of creation,
you should tweet that.
The world is abstraction slapped
good thing
on
we're
top
recording.
of
You
mystery.
can you can take notes.
Got it. Will do. No, I just wanted to close with this idea of like, I mean, I have a blog post to write about this in the Persian, my Rumi class. Rumi, the Persian poet. My teacher has this, the theory of the numbers in Persian mysticism is how creation comes to be. You have number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one means a thing, and it's basically number 1, 2, and 3 are unseen, and then what is unseen is now birthed into the world, right? But I'll reserve that for a blog post or another podcast.
No
but
spoiler alert.
the thing you said about the doer and the done thing, we're conduits. The image of the Sufi, have you guys seen this whirling dervish, right? Like, one hand is like this and one hand is like this and they're whirling, right? Vidhika, you've probably seen that image around. But that's the image of the Sufi. So what that represents is, the Sufi is the bridge. Man is the bridge between the world of wine and the world of mud, i.e. the world of the spirit and the world of matter, right? So that is what we're doing. We are channelers, right? We are the bridge. We're the river through which spirit flows into the universe and becomes manifest. So it's a beautiful note to end on. And one other thing I wanted to say is, like, Vidhika, you gave the example of acting on things. Visa, you gave the examples of acting on things. My example of acting on things is basically this podcast, or this thing, because I just tweeted it. Vidhika said something, and I was like, I know I need to jump on this right now, because I was like, hey, you want to jump on a call tomorrow? And this is like 7 days to the day that I tweeted it. It's like, okay, we have something.
Yeah.
And I'm going to not think about it too much. I'm just like, okay, throw it out. Then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I feel like that came full circle in a beautiful way.
I feel like this is one of my acts of courage because this is not something I would normally like think to do. And so the tweet was easy because there was no talk is cheap, right? But then actually being here and doing this is
But everything's threading, Vidhika. That's rabbit number 2, and then now this is rabbit, right? This just became something. At that point, it was just that thing. So I don't want to short sell your tweet because that got me all kinds of excited. And
no, I mean, I'm glad. I don't think we would be here right now if I hadn't tweeted.
Definitely
so I'm going to
not.
pat myself on the back for that. But yeah,
definitely not.
So
A tweet
All
that
right.
birthed like a 2.5 hour, like a Bollywood movie length conversation.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Visa, for being here. And thank you for being so generous with your time.
yes, thank you.
I asked you like, hey, it's probably take an hour or so of your time. And you've been here for 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think we chatted for like 15, 20 minutes before you were here. So no, thank you so much. Really, really, really appreciate your being with us, and for all your writing and thoughts, and for bringing the Twitter community together, and for being here.
Yeah, and this is a lot of fun. So
yeah,
thank you.
This is awesome.
Cool.
Okay. All right. Thank you, and thanks for anyone listening, or everyone listening, I should say. We will close the show with that. See you guys next time.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.